Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
Long video will be tonight, but there's a few things. Good evening, my beautiful brothers and sisters in Jesus. Today is Tuesday, the 4th of June, 2024. It is 9:29 p.m. here in Australia. I hope you're all very well and I hope you've been blessed. Sorry about my absence for the past little while. I got a ban from YouTube for a week, so hopefully that's all good now. So I've been doing lots of study, and I hope
Hey, Diane, good to see you.
as well, because the disclosure of information
I'm looking forward to this one. I love anything on time travel.
right now is absolutely beyond our imagination. It's very exciting. So I'm not entirely sure how long this video will be tonight, but there's a few things that is really on my heart that I want to talk to you about. And it's pretty much a 180 from what I used to preach here and teach on YouTube. So, but I feel like it's necessary that we talk about it and we at least explore it, because we are living in a very, very, very bizarre time at the moment, and it seems to be that all the lies that we
Hey, Gigabyte, good to see you.
revealed. So, with that being said, let's jump into this video. So, there's quite a few things I want to show you and share with you. The first thing I want to share with you is a TikTok video. And after we watch this video, I want to talk about it because this has really made me think. So we'll just get straight into this.
I've been rabbit holing again. The other day I made a video about how our calendar actually used to have 13 months, each month having 28 days. But then in, I think it was 1583, the Pope put forth the Gregorian calendar. And I learned some new things, some more information about this today, and I'm a little unwell at how this is tying together, but I'm going to share it. I'm going to share a couple clips in this video from other videos that I have watched on this topic, and then I'm going to tie them together for you. Okay. But first, did you even know that you could go back in your calendar on your phone to the year 1582, and you can see that they erased, they deleted, they just got rid of 2 weeks of time. Okay, so keep that in mind, because what I'm about to show you is all going to make sense in the end, I promise. So stick with me. So this first clip is a creator who is talking about how much time we've lost overall since the change of the calendar. And okay, just watch this first clip.
Living in it at once, but then I saw this comment. So if we're in 2014, according to your calendar, 2020 Gregorian calendar corresponds to 2012 your calendar, when the truth started to come out and people woke. So the Mayans are right. COVID really put everyone in 2020. Using your calendar, that means that the year 2012 was the end of the world. Mind blown. Okay, so of course I had to look up when our calendar started. It was in 1582. Ethiopian calendar started around AD 400. So they are obviously way more correct than we are. How many years did we lose switching to the Gregorian calendar? 8 years. We're lost in translation when the switch to the Gregorian calendar was made to in the 15th century. If you guys remember, the Mayan calendar says that the end of the world would be on December 21st, 2012. And even according to the
God doesn't measure time like these times by time. He measures it by how close the church is to being saved.
Julian calendar,
He don't rely on calendars.
that would be on January 21st, 2020.
Hey, guys, good to see you, mate.
So I'm freaking out in the middle of the night, and I messaged my dear friend, JK Ultra Jen. If you guys aren't following her, please go follow her, who's super into all this stuff. And I was like, girl, I'm sure you know this, but did you know this? And her and I are both freaking out because we didn't know this. So she goes and converts. What day is December 21st, 2012 in the Ethiopian calendar? What does it calculate to us? December 31st, 2019. So the last day of the world, according to the Mayan calendar, was on December 21st, 2012, if we had kept up with the original calendar. But because we switched it, it was December 31st, 2019. So in 2020, the new world started. So we have already shifted into a new dimension. And this is why everything is so different. This makes so much sense. Are you guys freaking out? Because I'm freaking out.
No, because it wasn't the end of the world, so the Mayans were wrong.
Okay, now this next clip is from a video on Rumble, a interview with Carrie Cassidy, and she is interviewing
Project
a
Camelot,
whistleblower who worked for the CIA, who was charged with finding an alternate option to the one and only option that the elites, actually the deletes. Side note, on my full moon video, one of my followers commented that she calls them the deletes instead of the elites, and I think we need to make that a thing. Okay, so he talks about how he got hired by the deletes to come up with an alternative outcome to our future timeline because they were conducting Project Looking Glass and they were using all these looking glass, these supercomputers, as well as something called the Yellow Cube or the Yellow Book to predict the future. And then they were looking at all the possible scenarios and timelines and then picking the one that was the most successful for them and following those steps. But then it all came to a halt because all these looking glass is at one point decided there was only one possible outcome left, and they were all saying the same thing. So this guy was hired to try and find a loophole, to find any other alternative to what these were telling them, the one outcome, the only possible outcome that could happen. Okay, so now with all of that, watch this one.
People, very smart people, began to figure out that something big was coming. Something that made it so all the possibilities of all the future scenarios of any choice, any possibility that was fed in and observed through the looking glass inherently ended up in the same future. And no decision, no possibility changed past a certain
Hey,
point.
Shawnee, good to see you.
That's the big secret.
Okay, so is that certain point?
It well coincides with December 21st, 2012.
So at that point, all possibilities lead to the same
Timelines. All possible timelines lead to the same basic set of history in the future.
And what is that history? Did you know that, or did you find out?
That is the big question. That is the big secret. That is what sends everybody that has all of the information, that knows everything, into a blind panic. The people that know everything about Looking Glass, that have gotten all the reports and all the information, the elites of the world, probably figured out that that was the end of the game. I mean, nothing could be manipulated beyond that point.
So do you think that's held true? In other words, well, I have about 16 questions, but do you think that's true or holding true, that nothing can be manipulated, that they haven't found a way to
That's Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot.
manipulate, that that's still the case, it's still an end game, and still they cannot go beyond a certain point?
At a certain point, after they're done hearing the computer tell them, this is what's going to happen over and over and over and over again, all they become focused on is, how do we fix it?
What is the this that's going to happen?
The inevitable contraction of the timelines.
But what does that mean for this reality? Do you know that?
I don't know that. What I do know is that I was called in.
Diane, no one wants her electric powered cars. No one wants them. They know they're not reliable.
And asked to solve this problem, this timeline contraction problem. And I eventually did my due diligence and did all the investigating and basically only had one piece of information, and that was reinforcement. The computer's right. The timeline.
No, Camelot came from King Arthur. That's where Camelot come from, King Arthur.
You guys don't tell me about it, so I can't help you.
But what you're basically, you came back with was, it is inevitable.
There's an inevitable event. It's been forecast, it's been predicted, it's been fed to us in a slop trough of what they want us to believe will happen.
But they don't.
However, they don't actually have control over what happens. They only have control over the reaction, and it seems that no matter what they try to do to cause their desired reaction, it's going to have an opposite effect.
Interesting.
Now, it's much, much easier for me to explain today what that process is as opposed to back then. But if I had to give it a name, I would say it's the awakening process. It's an evolution of consciousness that cannot, will not, and no matter what decisions or possibilities are injected into the equation, eventually it all resolves down to us all learning the truth and becoming aware of this massive dam of lies that has been built.
Down burying a
that
father of
keep
the
us from knowing
kids. Did you know about
massive
that?
volume of information we show us.
He died.
I think
Okay, well, that's very, very, my mentor
He gets very-
told that.
He gets buried today. I couldn't go because I had to wait for Mum.
And your exposure.
He was a good guy.
So now we know. The Great Awakening.
Till Saturday or
is
Sunday?
inevitable. I mean, we've always known, but this is amazing confirmation. But more importantly, with the calendar and with the date of December 21st, 2012, lines up to December 31st, 2019, New Year's Eve, the day before 2020, the day before everything changed, the day the plan was unfolded to try with every desperation they could muster to hold on to their control. This even more confirms with this eclipse coming on Monday that we have to be
I
ready.
didn't
for
know there
battle.
was a song about
And that
Camelot.
means being in our highest vibration. I made a whole video about this the other day and I pinned it
Okay, this is all about vibration. So I wish I get rid of this girl and go back to the original host.
at the top of my profile. So if you haven't seen that, please watch it. Okay, let's go.
All right, so I hope you were able to see all of that properly. I'm just going to go over it a little bit and explain it for those
Stick
of
with me.
you.
So this
Okay, so here she's showing a calendar here. You can go back into your phone to the year 1582 and you can see October 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it swaps over to 15th. So it goes from October 4th to October the 15th. Okay, this is when the Gregorian calendar kicked in. So the 4th of October, 1582 was in the Julian calendar, and then they just took 11 days out. So anyway, so she talks about that. And then the next thing,
first clip.
she's talking about,
2020 Gregorian calendar.
the next thing she's talking about is the Ethiopian calendar. Okay, they're 8 years behind us. Well, actually, to be frank, they're actually on the right date. And so, long story short, it seems like when the Mayans were saying, you know, the end of the world was going to be on December the 21st, 2012, it aligned to our calendar the 31st of December 2019. Okay, and did we not, the next day in 2020, the first day of 2020, did the world not change? Yes, it did. Okay, so
Okay, that's a bit of a stretch.
here's a little bit more. Now, what's so interesting about this and why I'm sharing this video with you is because of this guy, okay? And I am not able to link anything at the moment because that's part of my restriction. So you're going to have to look onto TikTok, and the name of this video is, the channel is called It's Not Important 1111. It's Not Important 1111. Okay, all one word. And it's Area 51 and Project Looking Glass. Now, this guy, he was a CIA person, okay, and they hired this person to basically, you know, the government, whatever, they've got this thing called Project Looking Glass. It's kind of like a time traveling, looking into the future type of thing. Yes, it's real. Okay, I don't have time to go into showing you proof of all this stuff. There's things like remote viewing. This is all legit real stuff
Oh,
that goes
no
on. Okay?
way.
We just have no idea the advancements of technology.
I just looked at the link Diane done about Camelot. They made you sing that song on a bus. Wow.
That these people or these entities have. Okay, so basically what they're saying in a nutshell is all the possibilities, the hundreds of possibilities of the future, all convert down to one possibility, and they've done it hundreds of times over and over and over again, and that will never change. There's only one outcome, and it's the convergence of the timeline. In other words, the end of the end of the end. Okay, and this guy was hired to solve this problem because the elites were like, no, we don't like the end result, because the end result means we lose all our power. It's end game for us. Everything gets revealed, blah, blah, blah. And so they hired this guy to try and solve this problem. And he's like, well, I'm getting the same results as you guys. All the probabilities that have been thrown into this computer, into this looking glass, it seems to be, to me, that, this is one inevitable event that's going to happen. And then he explains at the end that he can explain what it is now better than he could back when he was asked to do this. And that is the awakening process. Okay, what's happening right now, brothers and sisters? This is so exciting. This is everything that, you guys have been going on this journey with me. We've pretty much gone 180 from where we were,
Okay, she said she was a Christian at the beginning of this, but sounds more New Age.
looking for the rapture and setting dates and doing all that kind of stuff. But that was such a distraction, okay? It's a total distraction. Now we're seeing...
Hey, Phil, good to see you, mate.
Like I've always said, even before that eclipse, I told you in my videos that the eclipse that was coming up, that was it. That was going to be the curtain, the veil falling, and boy, did it ever fall, brothers and sisters. Now we are available to see, what the truth is, and everything that is hidden will now be revealed. And like the girl said at the beginning of the video, talking about the calendar, what happened in 2020, we're not going to say the name, but what happened, that was there, because like I was saying, this guy here, he said he's realizing that they can't change the inevitable event, but they're going to try their damnedest to try and keep us under control long enough before this happens, okay? And this is exactly where the rapture's coming in. And, because the thing with the rapture is, I want to say this in a delicate way because I don't mean to offend anybody, but the thing with the rapture is, brothers and sisters, is it a constant chasing of a sign. Every person that sees a news article, something happened in Israel, or something happens with the stock markets, or something happens with this and with that, oh, it's a sign, it's the end, it's the rapture's going to happen. It's a constant chasing of that rabbit tail, and this is what they want. You have to come out of that, okay? You have to come out of that and start. I know this sounds so bizarre, and a year ago I couldn't imagine myself saying these things, but it is literally, you need to come up on a high vibration. And all that means, it's not la-di-da-di hippie talk. It means, when I say high vibration, I mean living in love and kindness and caring for everything, even to like plants and trees and grass and,
Okay.
I'm serious, brothers and sisters. This is what the key is. This is what keeps us of a high vibration, okay? It's loving, exactly what the golden rule is, love one another as you love yourself. And you have to love yourself as well, because it's, I don't know how many more videos I'm going to do, because I need to work on myself as well. This isn't just something that you can just say, all right, well, I'm going to, live in this high vibration. It takes work. It takes inner work, as inner spiritual work, and to change for me, 43 years
Okay.
of programmed indoctrination of, you know, I'm not worthy and all this other garbage, okay? That is so not true. We are precious, okay? We are so precious to Father, and we are so valuable. We are higher than the enemy, okay? And the Father is like enormously infinity times higher and more powerful than the enemy. So why are we giving the enemy so much playtime all the time, brothers and sisters? So again, I want to stress what this guy is saying. There's an inevitable. It means there's no doubt about it that this is going to happen. This is exactly what we're seeing right now. This is an inevitable event that's going to happen. And the deletes, as she calls them, which I love that, the deletes are freaking out. And their first big push of the freak out started in 2020. Okay? They're trying to grasp at us for control. But we need to wake up from our slumber, come out of it, and start continuously projecting high vibrations of love and light towards everything. Okay?
Okay, I'm not into this. She's doing love and light. That's new age stuff. She's not Christian. She wouldn't be saying that if she was. So in the spirit of time travel, I'll stick with this now.
She just wants space time.
Yeah, it's nonsense,
At
wasn't it?
Valia, we know a healthy gut means a happy you. Our deliciously creamy probiotic yogurt is proven to naturally boost digestion and immunity. Valia, get gut happy.
Subway's new fiery subs range is here. Subway does not accept responsibility for red faces, sweaty foreheads, or tears. We know what you're thinking couldn't be that hot at Subway, but trust us, it is. Why else would we be doing this legal Sunday disclaimer? Get them while they're hot, medium, and mild.
Do we want to bring up our guest? Start getting into the
I'd love to.
meat of things?
I've been looking forward to this.
Well, listening,
Yeah.
man.
Andrew D.
Andrew.
Well, buddy.
Hey,
Hello.
Nice to meet you,
Guys, that last one, she was too new age.
sir.
How you
Andy, nice to
doing?
meet you.
Your hands are nice and cold. I need to shake hands longer. Your hands are real nice and cold.
That's right. No worries.
Oh, yeah,
Oh.
Michael's up too.
And Michael.
I'm sorry, Michael. I forgot you were coming up also.
Welcome, Michael. My hands are too cold to pinch this clip.
Yeah, they're kind of awkward sometimes.
Just shake hands with Adrian for a few more minutes. Your hands will warm right up. There we go.
Yeah, they will.
Think I'm good?
So I'm pretty unfamiliar on what brings you up tonight and what your topics are.
Well, I was a child participant in DARPA's Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space program at the time of the emergence of different forms of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. It's been concealed from the American people that time travel existed as the secret twin, essentially, of Project Manhattan.
I know this guy. He was one of the first guys I found on the internet before I was saved. He's pretty interesting, if I remember right.
The atomic bomb project, because at the time that Project Manhattan was being formulated, and some of the world's leading physicists and engineers were being settled in Los Alamos, New Mexico, to develop the atomic bomb, Nikola Tesla's papers from his apartment in the New Yorker Hotel in Manhattan, New York, that had been seized by the War Department upon his death on January 7th of 1943, were forwarded by the president from the National Archives to Los Alamos, and they're still there. The Nikola Tesla's papers were never lost. 25 years later, by 1968, the U.S. defense community had pioneered Tesla teleportation, which is the capability to open up a vortal tunnel in time space through which somebody can pass. And by the fall of 1970, had found a way to adjust the time of the arrival of the individual via teleportation, backward or forward in time. So I was brought in to Project Pegasus as a child participant officially in the fall of 1969. Today, I'm a lawyer in private practice in Washington State, have been for 20 years. For the past 10 years, I've been running my own truth campaign around the advent of time travel to inform my fellow citizens that we have some remarkable technical capabilities that have been held back from the public that we could use to literally transform our society. And in the past year, my truth campaign about time travel has evolved into an independent campaign for president of the United States. I will be a candidate in the 2016 elections for president. I haven't announced yet, but I do intend to run.
Now,
I don't think he ran. If he did run, we never heard of him.
when you say independent, are you meaning independent of the two major parties or independent of all?
I mean, I'm going to be running in a completely independent, nonpartisan, trans-ideological campaign as a write-in candidate, because when I investigated running for president, I even found that it's become cost prohibitive to even get on the ballots. It's going to cost $3 to $5 million just to get on the ballots around the country. So I'm going to be running an internet-driven, a YouTube-supported independent candidacy as a write-in candidate. And I'm going to get around the black box voting scandal by having all of those who vote for me as a write-in and my vice president and my vice presidential running mate to send a postcard to my campaign headquarters indicating that they voted. And then those will be accounted by a major Big 8 accounting firm, and will determine whether the presidential election is in fact being rigged. But the bottom line is that it's become simply cost prohibitive.
Wow, he just mentioned an election being rigged.
For any independent American to now run for the highest offices in our land. I'm going to be running as an independent in a way that will prove that in 2016.
I mean, I think that's good. You know, I mean, the Republicans and Democrats certainly have a stranglehold on, you know, the political gridlock in Washington. At least it seems to me. But I really don't want to devolve so much into politics. We tend to go that road a lot on this show.
Right.
And I'm kind of sick of it. And what you're talking about sounds
intriguing. That's fair.
So I guess I'd like to start first with the basic science of the time travel and teleportation, because I've always just kind of understood it as a basic that the only way to travel in time is to go at the speed of or faster than the speed of light, which is impossible for things with mass.
That's not true.
Okay. So how is that?
Nikola Tesla discovered a form of energy that he found was latent and pervasive throughout the entire physical universe. He called it radiant energy. Radiant energy is not the ball lightning that he was throwing around his laboratory and that Andrew Carnegie and Mark Twain and some of his other friends would play with. He kept it secret. He had been experimenting with it beginning as early as his famous stay in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899. My late father, Raymond F. Bishago, recapitulated his experimentation with teleportation when he was a special projects engineer at the Thomas A. Edison Research Laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey, where my dad was employed from 1956 to 64. When you array radiant energy and somebody jumps through it, their inertia opens up a vortal tunnel in time-space. There is no transformation of the individual, and the individual does not have to be traveling at the speed of light. The only speed qualification was that when we jumped through the field of radiant energy, we had to be traveling at a meter per second, or whatever part of us didn't get through that field of energy within a meter per second would be lost. We would be dismembered if we didn't leap through very quickly with our limbs crunched up in front of us. In fact, there was a mishap.
I was about to say, how did they find that out? He's just about to tell us.
I was a child on a project. One of the boys teleporting with us to Santa Fe arrived standing in a public fountain with 3 inches of water.
Interesting, boss.
Effectively lost his feet because the specific gravity of the water was greater than the air around us. And what was below the surface of the water arrived a split second later and essentially slid off his ankles. And when I ran past his location, I could see his feet in the fountain. He was writhing on the ground with stumps for legs, for feet. So what the public and knowledgeable people such as yourself were not told, because it's been a state secret since teleportation was reduced to practice around 1967-68, about 25 years after Tesla's death, is that this energy exists and it has special properties that enable us to open up a vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space itself. We tend to think of space as a void. However, as the physicist Mark Cummings has noted, a cubic meter of space is so dense that it has as many ergs of energy in it as all of the grains of sand on every beach on Earth.
No
Space is
way,
densely
1
packed. That's one of
meter.
the reasons why, and energetically speaking, that's one of the reasons why the planets stay in their rotation around the sun. As Buckminster Fuller would say, we live in an omnipermeative universe. And I think if we begin to conceptualize it in that way, that space is so dense that when you use this form of energy that's actually universal, the inertia was opening up that fabric of time-space and we were passing through it. And in fact, there was no need for a device at the end of our journey. What we would see was a pinprick of light at the end of the
How'd you get back though?
tunnel. That was literally the outdoors as we were going through this microtubule. And then it would suddenly arrive very quickly and then hit us. And in several seconds, we would find footfall thousands of miles away. So for example, we were jumping from the old Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey. I mentioned the first time was in winter of 1968. I was a first grader. My dad was taking me to a meeting with Dr. Harold M. Agnew, one of the Manhattan Project physicists, when he was the director of the W Division, the Weapons Division at LANL, the Los Alamos National Laboratories. And it must have taken only 3 to 5 seconds to go those 2,005 miles. Just last week, it took me 3 hours to fly on a commercial airliner between Charlotte, North Carolina, and I think the pilot noted 3 hours later that we were over Albuquerque. So there's been a 45-year cover-up of a transport technology that we could have used to literally allow the average person, the everyday citizen, to overcome the limits of time and space aboard our planet.
Okay, so I have a few quick questions just regarding the science. When you say a vortal tunnel, is that the same as a wormhole, or is that something different?
No, a wormhole, the characteristics of a wormhole, and there was one form of time travel called plasma confinement that propagated about a 30-second wormhole. That, for example, I wormholed from spring of 1972 in East Hanover, New Jersey, to November 19th of 1863 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, via a time travel technology called plasma confinement. And that was a wormholing. A wormholing, as depicted in the cult documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know? Wormholing involves a rapidly cascading branching in a tunnel that's being opened up in time space. That's kind of like a roller coaster ride that is ratcheting as you go. You go down a hill and then over, sort of like the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios. You're going chaotically in different hither and yon with a kind of a cascading series of little blips along the way. We were not wormholing when we would jump between Curtiss-Wright in New Jersey.
No, the TV series was Time Tunnel, not Time Machine, Time Tunnel.
In the Santa Fe State Capitol grounds, and then later in the day, week, or year, be transported to the Sandia National Laboratory.
Yeah, I love sliders.
Where there was a Tesla teleporter that we would use to jump home to the tarmac at Curtiss-Wright. We were just simply going through a tunnel that was true and regular, and that was ultimately an oblate triangle. It was essentially a tunnel that was almost regularly circular, but you could see a slight triangulation. It was actually 3-sided, but in a very oblate way.
Wow.
And that was being opened up by our inertia as it passed through the radiant energy. So when I try to, when my claims are validated by today's leading time travel theorists, I'm talking about professors of physics like Dr. Michio Kaku and Dr. Ronald Mallet of the United States, certainly Dr. Stephen Hawking of Cambridge, and Dr. David Deutsch of Oxford would be in that same category. They can't understand how teleportation time travel could be possible, because the very energy that's working the energetic effect to accomplish it in the physical universe, actually the holographic universe we're living in, is something they haven't been exposed to. So it's like trying to explain swimming to what swimming is to somebody who's never encountered water. It's almost impossible to explain to them that Tesla's greatest contribution to applied science was the discovery of a form of energy that allows us to bend time-space to the point of opening tunnels up in it through which we can pass uninjured across great distances.
So energy, the radiant energy, as you call it, is that similar to what people talk about, like dark matter or antimatter, the stuff that
I don't know. I was a time traveler, and now I'm a time travel whistleblower. but I'm a lawyer and writer. And now a candidate for president. I was never a time travel technologist. It could be. I think the most intelligent thing I found was in the works of Dr. Walter Russell. Let me see if I get this right. And that is that electricity converts space into energy, and negative electricity converts energy into space. In other words, it was the application by Tesla of negative electricity that turned negative electricity into space, namely the Vortal tunnel that was being opened up by the teleporter. But I haven't contrived this information. I had arrived professionally long before I came forward with this information. I came forward in 2004, actually here in the Northwest, in a presentation of about 40 friends and friends of friends at a local hotel conference center in October of 2004, simply because I knew that I was under an ethical duty to reveal this information, because the world may need teleportation to overcome the crisis of environment and development that seems to be upon us.
Yeah, and it seems to me, I mean, if we had that just as an American, development, as long as we didn't research or reveal how we came across it, I mean, that would be an incredibly powerful asset. I mean, you figure just, the OPEC in the oil embargo in the 70s, wouldn't have mattered. I mean, when we have, basically unlimited travel, just instantaneous teleportation.
Well, DARPA, which was ARPA when I was brought into the project as a third grader in the fall of 1969, its chief legislative mandate is to prevent military surprise. And I'm speaking out now because Tesla teleportation was not implemented on a mass level. In a sense, I'm still working for the project, not officially, but just as an individual, because if we don't implement a mass system of Tesla teleportation with teleports around the country and the world, some other country or a rogue faction of a country, like a criminal organization or a terrorist group, could. I think the analogy is to, let's say, the situation that police officers in New York City find themselves. If police officers in New York are pursuing a fleeing felon, they have the legal authority to ask a taxi cab driver to step out of his taxi and take that taxi and pursue a fleeing felon. My analogy here is to the fact that if we don't implement a network of teleports and another faction does, they're going to have the power that the New York police officer has to grab that teleport and take it and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
To do a surprise attack on our country, or to do crimes that they would then flee from, if, let's say, it was an organized terrorist or criminal cell.
I'm going to have to pause real quick. We have a caller. Do you mind
Okay, sure. So I'm still working to protect my beloved country. I just wanted to emphasize that. The great American Republic.
Hey, caller, you're live on the air. What's your name?
Name is Dave.
Hello, Dave.
Hi there.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask the guest a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wanting to know why were children used for the experiment, and two, did they use animals first to make sure this was safe?
I don't know whether they used animals. Of course, they used monkeys and so forth, chimpanzees in the space program. But there were 5 reasons that I was able to glean during my service and in later discussions with my father, who was one of the project principals, about why children were used. That's a great question, because clearly they were exposing to children, namely school-age children, to new, dangerous, and experimental technologies. I was one of them, and we were medically injured and psychologically traumatized. So let me explain what their motives were. First, we were experimentees. They told us that the reason they were having us teleport, beginning extensively in the summer of 1970, which was the summer after our 3rd grade, was that they were testing the mental and physical effects of Tesla teleportation on children, basically from stable, well-provisioned backgrounds, the kind of like the analogy would be to the children of the president and vice president, in the event that they implemented teleportation on a limited basis to move our executive branch officials around the world. They wanted to know what the physical and mental effects on their children would be. Think of President Obama's 2 beautiful daughters. I was teleporting experimentally at the time, around the age they were when President Obama was elected in 2008, if you could think back. So every time when we would arrive in New Mexico, we would be physically examined and given a battery of about 2 hours of verbal and math problems, sort of SAT-like problems, at an old school site in Lamy, New Mexico. We would be bussed out there and be examined medically and cognitively.
Okay, I wonder if they're seeing if time travel makes you more intelligent. That's what it sounds like.
The second
Sounds like that's what they're looking for, I mean.
reason they needed to use children was that the chronovisors, which were the electro-optical devices that propagated moving holographic images of past and future events, were very sensitive at the time of their emergence. They would go on the blink as a result of the vocalizations, the heartbeat, the blood pressure, the footfall, or an errant cough or sneeze or something from an adult participant. Kind of collapse like a picture on an early television set. They would go on the blink, on the fritz. So they could either use small adults or highly intelligent children. And because they wanted to train the next cadre of adult, or the first cadre of adult US chrononauts or time travelers, they decided to work with a group of gifted and talented American school children, numbering 140. I was one of those 140. In fact, I was the second youngest of those 140, born roughly between 1957 and 61. So we were also, in other words, necessities to the use of the chronovisor as a time travel device. And I mentioned that third, we were trainees. It was expected that after high school, we would go on to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. And as Donald Rumsfeld explained to my father one day at a bar in New Mexico, he was the defense attaché to the project, we hope to send the kids onto the Naval Academy and use that as a pretext for future project activities. So we were clearly time-space cadets under the Navy, headed for the Naval Academy upon matriculation to college after high school. We were also what I call viewees, which is to say that they found when they were working with the perceptual quotient of adults and children.
Diane, Putin's going to take Kyiv, isn't he? He's going to go after the capital. He's got to.
In the intelligence community after World War II, just in conventional espionage, they found that children have more keen and accurate perceptions of things, especially that they haven't seen before, because adult perceptions are biased by the selection bias of what they've already seen. So they use the example of that if we send an adult time traveling to, let's say, the year 2160, and the adult sees somebody walking down the street with a holster, the adult will see a handgun in the holster. But when we send a child to that same location in 2016, the child comes back and says, no, it wasn't a pistol. The man had some kind of scientific implement in a holster on his belt. So it was believed that because we were tabula rasa, because we were blank slates, we would be better, essentially, time travel espionage agents to the non-local locations that we were sent to. So that was the fourth reason. The fifth and final one, my father explained late in his life and when I was in my 20s, and that is he had worked with the initial group of the 3 Navy enlisted men who were sent through the Tesla teleport and asphyxiated because the tunnel they opened up was too long. But they continued in the early days of time travel to use Navy personnel, and they found that more than occasionally, one of the adult people who was trained to time travel would become insane because of the psychological effects of moving between timelines. So in the same way that, let's say, somebody raised from childhood is more comfortable scuba diving and moving from the terrestrial to the aquatic environment and back again without any stress, they wanted to work with children so they would acclimate us to moving between our timeline and the past and future without any prospect that we would lose our minds in the process. So those were the 5 reasons I've been able to glean. I think that rather than looking at us as guinea pigs, which on one level we were, I think it's most appropriate, most accurate to say that we were child trainees with an expectation that we would go to Annapolis for our college years and then become the first cadre of U.S. chrononauts trained from childhood. That seemed to be the overall programmatic thrust of our participation.
I hope you caught all that, Dave.
I did.
We sheep are ready, Shawnee. We're good sheep.
I was, yeah. I was wondering, I wonder how they find everybody else. They call you, hey, we got an experiment. It's kind of dangerous, so we need children. I don't think they'd be signing my kids up.
Right. Well, Dave, let me say this, and that is that I was involved in the program from 1968 to 72. And if you look back, the human subject experimentation protocols emerged around 74, 75. The MK Ultra revelations under the Church Committee occurred in August of 77. And then the Torture Convention was passed later, I think around 1989 or something. So we were actually being put at medical and psychological risk by our country, indeed at risk of accidental death or serious injury prior to the development of those laws and policies. And in defense of my dad's position, he even said it to me once when one of his colleagues from Parsons flew out to Albuquerque rather than teleport out from Pasadena to northern New Mexico when we were there in the summer of 1973. He said, you know, Ray, my friend from work, is going to be flying out here because he's afraid of teleporting. I said, but Dad, you're involving me. I mean, I'm your son. So if it's dangerous, I guess you made a decision that not only you would put yourself at risk, but among your 5 kids, you know, me, the youngest. And I said, why have you? I actually confronted my father about why he had agreed to let me be brought into the program, because the program had determined for its own reasons that I had to be involved. I think because the team members in the year 2045 said, look, Andy's got to be involved because he remembers everything that happens. He writes the books about the project, and he then seeks and wins high office and implements Tesla teleportation. So he's got to be a participant. And my dad said something very intelligent. He was an intelligent, loving, thoughtful father and human being. He said, son, every time human beings move to some other environment, whether it's just a location or a new era of human history, you know, even if it's something as simple as fleeing their island home because of a volcanic eruption or to find better hunting grounds, human beings have always put their kith and kin, even their toddlers, their babies, on their shoulders and forded streams and oceans and sought a better future for their children. That's part of the human experience. And look, I knew that this is what the future holds, that your children will be regularly Tesla teleporting from point A to point B around our planet. So I've involved you because I believe in you, and I know that you have the strength and capability to pioneer time travel involving children. And so I brought you along because I put you on my shoulders and I've taken you into that world, and you're being given the opportunity to do things and see things that most people in my generation will never have the opportunity to do and see, but that you and your children's generation will. And so I really love my dad, and he's really, well, as people will see as the story emerges in my book and so forth, my dad is not an ogre or a villain. He's actually one of the heroes of the story, because he and his longtime friend and former girlfriend in New Mexico, Connie Chavez, were using me to release the information from the inside of the project, but on a delayed basis, time-wise. In other words, they were carrying out an illicit release of the information on a delayed basis through me because they were informing me of everything. I have information about every technology that was operational, every modality of time travel. It was fully operational by 1970, and I'm developing and I'm telling people about it. I've now done 15 television shows, over 100 radio shows. In California recently, I was recognized by 2 brothers who were visiting Los Angeles from Scotland. My story has been heard not only by over 100 million people in North America, but by 50 million people in Central and South America through the good graces of Jaime Maussan, the Mexican television journalist, the Mike Wallace of Mexico. So the story is now reaching the entire world, and I'm overjoyed and I'm at peace right now in my life because I'm implementing what my late dear father asked me to do, which was after his death to tell the entire family. I have a large family. I'm the youngest of 7. And then after you tell the family and explain what we were part of, because it was great, it was a momentous set of developments in applied science, then tell the entire world. And that's what I've been doing through primarily the internet, but now through television and radio. So my dad, I'd just like to emphasize, he's one of the heroes of the story because he was actually utilizing me not just to be one of the child pioneers of time travel, but to be the person who would take the information to the world, and I'm doing so.
How did your family take this? I guess I want to get to the caller so we can clear up the line if need be. Dave, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks, Dave. Good question.
Ouch. So how did your family take this?
Well, my mother was dying of cancer when I began to focus on my memories beginning around the year 2000. She had developed breast cancer in 1997, and she perished from breast cancer in May of 2003. I hate to really say this because it really shows to what, I mean, I took care of her during those 6 years, so I'm glad that I could be her primary caregiver. But I also was obsessed with what had happened to me because I began to focus on what happened to me in 2000. I never forgot my memories, but I began that process of going back and writing down what happened. And
Wasn't there about age 30 where things start to come forward, things that
Yeah,
especially through mind control.
Yeah, exactly. Memory is related to hormones. So when males go through that gradual loss of testosterone after 35, especially between age 35 and 40, which is precisely my age when the memory started not so much coming to the fore, but where I began obsessing about my childhood and remembering, not remembering them, but focusing on them, that precisely corresponded to that return of childhood trauma and memory that begins at around age 35. Some people, in fact, have midlife crises around that time because of some things that have been buried from early childhood. So I began to focus. I was 35 in 1996, so certainly by 40, by 2001, I was deeply immersed in the process of writing down what happened. And you almost come off as sort of not schizophrenic, but sort of bipolar when you're in that situation because you're going for a maximum amount of detail and so forth. My mother knew everything. In fact, what I was going to say was I felt a little bit bad that on her
Vas, did you hear me coughing?
deathbed.
I'm okay, mate.
I said, Mom, you knew everything, didn't you? She said, yes. And this is literally a few weeks before she died. And I said, you knew about the teleporting to New Mexico? And she said, yes. And I said, that big fight that you had with Dad in summer of 71 when you broke the doorknob off the master bedroom door, that was because he had told you that he had involved me in teleportation and time travel. Is that correct? And she said, yes. And what she said was that was then. She was starting to worry about me, that I was getting sidetracked because I was obsessing about what had happened to me when in fact I was starting my life's work, which was the process of waging my truth campaign about time travel having been achieved by 1970. Multiple modalities of time travel having been achieved when we were children. With my 4 older siblings, there was a split. The 2 that were coast-to-coast listeners were accommodating and attentive and were just listening. And then the 2 that weren't coast-to-coast AM listeners were very reactive and judgmental.
Larry, that was one of your first major
venues.
Yeah, venues for outlaying this story.
Yeah, so let's dedicate tonight's show to George Noory, because if it was not for him, my story would not have reached the mainstream. So I've now done 7 appearances with George, and he's just wonderful to work with, and definitely another champion of the story, another American hero. But what I learned is what we had been told when I was trained on Project Pegasus as a child came true in a big way. I've now had about 2,000 major arguments with strangers on Facebook about my claims. We were told that if we told anybody outside the project, including our brothers and sisters, kids in the neighborhood, kids at Sunday school, kids in class, there would be 3 reactions, and also with adults, obviously, our aunts and uncles, whatever, the guy down the street, whatever. Either people would believe we were lying, and there's not a good reaction to liars socially. There's a negative response to lying or perceived lying. Or people would believe we were crazy, or the person would grudgingly believe us and be envious that they were not involved. And that is what has happened in the public realm. I've had, again, probably about 2,000 major battles online with people who are exhibiting one of those traits about my claims, so that when I ultimately, as a skilled trial lawyer, blow them away and prove what I'm saying, because my story is true, they ultimately sort of drop out of the argument by ultimately saying, well, you're just a liar, or you're crazy, or gee, you know something, I believe you now, and I really wish I was involved. So I found that I had to practice something I hadn't learned in life, which is forgiveness. I had to learn to forgive my disbelieving siblings. I had to learn to forgive my college buddies who told me to see a psychiatrist. They thought I had become derailed. But in fact, I was simply another American who had had a non-ordinary set of experiences in childhood in the direct implementation of the lost technologies and the lost papers of Nikola Tesla.
I should mention, I met Andy back in 2004, so I've actually known this story for quite some time, and he lived with me for some time as well. So, and in fact, I was back.
One of my patrons.
Yeah, back in those days when he was actually uncovering a lot of this thing. But I can tell you, I've seen a lot of things, and when he first went through the story with me, when he first explained everything, and I sensed that there was something real about this story, it took me a couple days myself to integrate this. And I'm reminded about the comment that Ben Rich made. Ben Rich was the guy who ran the Lockheed Skunk Works. And he said, we are 50 years beyond anything you could possibly imagine. In other words, the technologies that we actually really have are so far beyond what you might see in Star Trek. We've been through Star Trek and beyond, in terms of the technology we have. So the most American people and most people in the world have no sense as to where we're really at. And there's there's a deliberate reason for that. A lot of things get suppressed. A lot of things happen in black projects, so we don't get this knowledge out that this stuff really exists. I myself was in a hotel room a year ago, and a guy had a transformer, and he had all the gauges hooked up to it, and I saw a transformer that produced over unity. In other words, it was putting out more power than was being put in. So I've seen technologies like that, but those kinds of technologies you never hear about. Those technologies have been suppressed.
Now, why would they want to keep it a secret? I mean, with so much money to be gained, and so much benefit to come to people, and I would also say, I mean, from what I know of Tesla, he always wanted his technologies and powers to be used for the good of the people. So why would they,
Well, I can answer that. What happened is Tesla died on January 7th of 43. There was a team of War Department officials, 2 War Department officers, and 2 FBI agents who were racing to his suite at the New Yorker Hotel to seize his paperwork, any prototypes in the laboratory, his formulae, mathematical formulae, schematics of his inventions. So the War Department seized his paperwork, forwarded it to the National Archives, but then it was sent to the most logical place on the planet, namely Los Alamos, and became the secret twin of the Manhattan Project. I attended a lecture in the winter-spring timeframe of 1971 at the Cerrillos Cultural Center site. There was an underground amphitheater there. Now you can look down on it from the surface and see it if you visit that site. The roof is missing because there was a fire there. And Donald Rumsfeld, who at that point had not yet served twice as defense secretary, he was simply a former Navy pilot during the Korean conflict.
You brought up Rumsfeld before, Vas.
And a former congressman from the suburbs of Chicago, gave about a half-hour lecture in which he explained, as he said, that the primary purpose of teleportation is military. It will allow us to put troops precisely where they are needed on the battlefield. And then he explained how the Defense Department, during its studies into what happened during World War II, found that the majority of our casualties were not killed on the front lines or in the rear areas, but in the middle ground between the rear areas and they were moving up to go to the front lines by things like friendly fire from behind, sniper fire from ahead, and let's say drowning with their packs in watery areas and that sort of thing, such as the marshes of France that we lost so many soldiers in Operation Market Garden in 44 and in Operation Varsity in 45 as we were invading Germany. So he said that Tesla teleportation will enable us to put troops precisely.
And Shawnee, that was my point about 2012 and the end days. It's not about timelines in a calendar date. It's about the filling up of souls saved. That's the timeline Jesus uses, how many souls are saved. You don't use 21st of December 2012.
Where they're needed and obviate that risk to combat infantry. In other words, the tragedy of the secret history of U.S. time travel is that Tesla teleportation was weaponized from the very time it was obtained by the Defense Department in 1943. We had
surprise.
And that's where it has remained ever since. I mean, the Los Alamos National Laboratory is where Tesla's papers are and where you need a secured clearance to read them, as my father had. It was then and is now the leading bomb factory of the United States. It's a major part of the military-industrial complex. In the case of the other technologies, such as the chronovisors, that allow us to propagate holographic images of past and future events, and even send people there if they stand in the hologram when it's propagated, that gave the U.S. intelligence community an unprecedented advantage in the area of domestic and foreign surveillance, because they could see into a room not only in real time, but into a room that somebody had been in and hear the conversation 5 years ago and what they might be doing or saying to somebody in a room 5 years from now. So
you talked about listening to George Washington, and through a device where, for example, picture a television screen where you can tune in to any point in time. What happens when you have time, either not just time travel capability, but the ability to go back and look at what happened at a given point in time? What does that do for, in terms of security, and what does that do to shake up the world in terms of finding out what really happened in certain situations?
Yeah, that was explained to us as well. The idea of even citing a military base is of strategic significance. So if you went back and found that there was massive subsidence there, you wouldn't want to see a military base fall into a sinkhole. So they even wanted to use chronovision just in their simple planning of the deployment of the military-industrial complex, this militarized American society in which today, 59% of the U.S. budget, this is one of the reasons I'm running for president, 59% of the U.S. budget is going to military spending, to so-called defense spending, but it's really just the perpetuation of this negative form of power that's administered by the military-industrial complex. So this is the tragedy of the secret history of time travel, and one of the major reasons I'm speaking out. These devices, which could revolutionize our civic infrastructure, which Tesla had been secretly working on from 1899 forward, which he kept secret even during that last kind of strange 15 years of his life where he was just ostensibly raising pigeons. He was actually keeping this information secret from Edison, from J.P. Morgan, from George Westinghouse, his nemesis in the world of invention, because he knew that in his mind and in his paperwork was the infrastructure of the human future. I mean, I visited when I was a child in Project Pegasus, the year 2045. And in that 2045, a time that today is only 30 years in the future, Tesla teleportation was so ubiquitous that teleport stations are as commonplace as elevator landings are in our civilization. So you could walk out of your front door, go to a teleport about the size of a public restroom down the street from you where your bus stop might be, punch in your information and jump to your downtown area and go to the building where you work. And then after working that day, walk down the stairs in your office building and go into another teleport, just like an elevator, and teleport home to your front yard. In other words, by 2045, Tesla teleportation is going to allow us to eliminate all of the forms of transportation that depend on the internal combustion engine, which are putting 60% of the human contribution to climate change in our global atmosphere every year. 60% of greenhouse gases come from the transport sector of the greenhouse gases that we're responsible for as a human society.
Did you have any idea what kind of energy would be involved in a teleportation? Let's say to go across the country.
It was radiant energy, except that it had been, we were just going through the Vortal tunnel that was propagated in a kind of a raw sense through this rudimentary device.
So you're tapping into that energy, but so what was there, were you in a room or a building that had a massive amount of power?
No. In fact, the Tesla teleporter Curtiss Wright had kind of a double thick plug and
like a 220.
Yeah, an outlet on the wall that you might run, let's say, a small drill press or a lathe with. It wasn't even industrial size. It was like what you might have in your garage to power
so it'd be like
your saw. Yeah, you go. And so it was not energy intensive, and yet the power of the radiant energy was incredible. It was numerous orders of magnitude above the combustion of fuel, of fossil fuels, to power, let's say, a commercial airliner, because the distance between Woodridge, New Jersey, and Santa Fe, New Mexico is 2,005 miles, and we were reaching that in 3 to 5 seconds with the power that was being derived from a small, home appliance size plug and outlet. But it was radiant energy again. What was so amazing about 2045 is when I said, how am I getting back to 1972? They said that. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense because that's the wall. And they laughed and they said, no, Andy, our teleports are actually recessed into bare walls. Let me show you. And he hit the wall and this light showed up that was the square that I had to run at.
Shawnee, I've dreamt of a few tsunamis. Mostly I'm above it looking down and watching it come in. But sometimes I've been caught in the rips. So, yeah.
And he could punch in the time. And he said, the only problem is that if you want to go home to 1972, you're going to have to overcome your natural fear or natural aversion to run at the wall with the fear that you'd knock yourself out. So he said, we'll give you a couple of dry runs, but you're basically going to have to run at full speed at that wall. And I did. And again, we were back in the Vortal tunnel that looked identical to the one that the shop model of Curtiss Wright produced, except rather than being in it for 3 seconds, we were in it for about 30 seconds to go back those 75 plus miles to 1972. And I was a saxophone player, so I found it kind of easy just to inflate my lungs and kind of sip air off the top. It was Tesla teleportation. It was the same radiant energy. Now, they were getting us back from 2045 at the microwave tower array in the Lobo Overlook site, which is due west of the Continental Divide, up Highway 160 in southwest Colorado. If you go up the 3 miles up that serpentine road up to the Lobo Overlook, or what's called Microwave Tower Road, you'll find what we call Montauk Southwest, which is this huge antenna array. And it was explained to us, even back in the project days, that they were pinging into space so that the staff members in 2045 could locate our position in time space and get us back, October 12th, 1970.
So you had some journeys where you went back in time. I know you went back to like dinosaur era.
So the dinosaurs in Arizona.
But there wasn't a teleporter back there to get back. So how did that work where it just collapsed and faded?
Exactly. That was one of the technical limits, because with a Tesla teleporter, you physically tunnel through time space. When we started Tesla teleporting, we were then transported by automobile, ultimately at the end of the day, week, or month, let's say, to an identical teleporter that existed in our time to jump from Sandia back to Curtiss-Wright. But we couldn't go to the time before the advent of the Tesla teleporter, its operational advent in 1967-68, because we would be stranded in time. So they had to develop ways to send somebody to the past before the advent of teleportation, be there for a while to have some kind of meaningful interaction with that quantum environment, and then automatically come home without the need for a return device. And that's one of the reasons why a major thrust of Project Pegasus was chronovision. Because when the hologram propagated by the chronovisor naturally collapsed, or they collapsed it, we were in a field of supercharged particles called scintillation for about 90 seconds. And then you could start to see the other kids popping into view as initially as black body emanations, part of their arm, their leg, whatever. And then all the particles would clear after about 100 seconds, and we were back on the stage in New Jersey. That was also the reason that Dr. Sterling Colgate developed sending somebody to the past, as I was sent to Gettysburg on the day that Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, via the plasma confinement chamber, because all the radioactive plasma did is create a localized quantum field effect that essentially embedded you temporarily in the past. And then when they wanted to bring you back, or when that effect naturally wore off, you then just transitioned. You wormholed there, but you just transitioned.
It came back in the same room.
And came back in the chamber. Yeah. In fact, that's what I'm doing in the Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg. My whole face is obliterated, even though the men standing in front of me talking were closer to the camera, and the Union soldiers behind me protecting the dais where Lincoln was just arrived to deliver the Gettysburg Address. You can see their facial features and not mine, because the photographer, who in all likelihood was Matthew Brady or one of his assistant photographers, literally captured me in that photograph as I was fading from view and going back to 1972. So you can see the right side of my skull, my right eye socket, and all of my teeth, not just my smile or the left side of my teeth, but my entire dentition is visible because I was turned all the way to the right with my head cocked a little bit further to the right, and the cameraman was over here. So he got like an X-ray of my teeth, even though Marie Curie, the discoverer of radium, and hence the scientist who made X-ray possible, would not be born for 4 years in 1867. So they developed ways essentially of embedding us in the past where we naturally came back without the need for a return device.
So in one of your trips in the past, you actually have photographed?
Yes, I was photographed on November 19th, 1863. I'm the largest person in the, well, almost the largest person in the shot. I'm standing with my back to the dais and my right foot in the opposite direction where Lincoln had just arrived, on the right side of the dais where he gave the Gettysburg Address. And when this photograph was donated to the Library of Congress in a cache of photographs that had once been owned by Matthew Brady, the legendary Civil War photographer, a photo analyst at the Library of Congress named Josephine Cobb took out her magnifying glass and found several pixels that show President Lincoln's face right as he was sitting down on the dais. I know he was just sitting down because I heard the incredible enthusiastic cheer for him. It was just gave me chills in my back as I heard it, as he probably got off his horse and walked up onto the dais. And he was 6'4". He was certainly visible to everybody in the audience. There's about 1,000 people there this night. So that photograph was captioned, "Citizens of Gettysburg gathering to hear President Lincoln give an address." In fact, it was
I found a dead one in the spare
room. Now, that's
room.
probably the most remarkable photograph ever taken, because until 2007, it was the sole surviving photograph of Lincoln at Gettysburg on the day that he gave his famous speech there. It's the first known photograph to show a time traveler from the future, namely myself, from a time lab in East Hanover, New Jersey, under the direction of Dr. Sterling Colgate, the president of New Mexico Tech, in spring of 1972, and my late father was also at that lab. And it's also a photograph that physically shows, in the very anomaly that was captured, consisting of how my face was portrayed and part of my skeleton, essentially, that I was transitioning out of the scene, even though as an early photograph, you can see shadows of people who walked around, who changed location as that early negative was being exposed. In fact, there's also
I reckon that truck's pretty ugly.
an entity standing next to me. And let me mention something now that I didn't mention during the earlier show here tonight, which was that this is the only public historical photograph at the National Archives that's classified. When the photo analyst working with me, namely my fellow U.S. chrononaut William B. Stillings, Brett Stillings, and John Gannon of Detroit, Michigan, went in search of that photograph in Washington, they were told that they would never be given access to the original photograph or negatives because it's the only public photograph in the National Archives that's classified. Why? I don't think it's just because it shows Lincoln at Gettysburg. It shows the first time traveler from the future. It is already known to have been known as such in the future because my story has been known since the early 70s as having been the breakthrough story revealing the time travel potential that our government developed in the early 70s. And it also shows me fading from view and hence proves time travel. And it proves my earlier claims that I did transition from view right as the photographer was exposing his negative to the sunlight beneath his, outside of his canopy. And also they're standing next to me is this large, I'll say vaguely Asiatic entity that does not look human but looks extraterrestrial. So one of the shadow bodies in the photograph is right next to me. He's about a foot taller than me and he looks like a gray extraterrestrial. So that must have been some interdimensional who was having his turn on his 21st birthday or something, or going to see Andy on Earth, visiting Lincoln at Gettysburg or whatever. But it's not a human entity. It's another form of humanoid.
Are there other pictures of the other kids or anybody that had traveled back or anything?
Not that I know of. There have been some anomalous out-of-time photographs. Dr. Bruce Goldberg talks about the one of the person from the Midwest who always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon, did so when they were growing up in the 1940s and then went there in the 1970s. And when they came home and developed their photographs, all of the cars in the photos were from the 40s, as if their will had willed them back to the Grand Canyon location of the 40s, not the 70s. And I don't believe necessarily that some of the ones that are surfacing on the internet are time travelers from the future. Like the famous one of the young man in the college sweater with the Ray-Ban photographs at that dam opening in British Columbia. Yeah. I'm sorry, but his clothing is from the 1940s, not our time. He's a young man from that time frame.
Okay, I know the photograph they're talking about. He's got sunglasses as well. Looks pretty different clothing to me.
No, because I intentionally left the area around the dais right as Lincoln was arriving. In fact, shortly before he arrived. So I heard the cheer of the people of Gettysburg for the president when I already had my back to the dais and I had walked about 100 paces from the dais. But my father stood there dressed as a Pennsylvania farmer right in front of the president. And he said, I don't know what you were so concerned about, because I was apprehensive about standing there watching Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. He said he was just a man with a beard giving a speech. And I said, well, what did he sound like, Dad? This is actually the very question that you're asking. And he said, well, that's one very interesting thing about going to see Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. And this is, mind you, this is in the early 70s before we knew that Lincoln had Marfan's disease, which is a degenerative disease of the connective tissue where the connective tissue gets stretched, including arguably or presumably the tissues in the vocal cords. He said Lincoln had an exceptionally rural, twangy accent. And then he imitated President Lincoln. He said, it sounded kind of like this. 77 years ago, our forefathers brought to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So that's what Lincoln sounded like. Thanks.
Okay, that's a detail you don't make up.
A guy who was in his 50s, he said his grandfather was extremely old as a little kid, and he got to hear Lincoln. He said when Green Acres came on, the first time he heard Mr. Haney, he goes,
Yeah.
"That's the voice."
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. That,
Yeah.
that sounds.
Yeah, yeah. So it was only like in the 80s that they went back and they realized that one of the things the president was suffering from was Marfan syndrome, and that affected the heart. Certainly, the Abraham Lincoln that I saw walk into Ford's Theater during my 6 or 7 visits in summer of '71 to Ford's Theater on a mission to walk up the balcony stairs, and get behind their balcony seating, was a very thin and emaciated 56-year-old. On the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot, he was essentially a walking skeleton in his suit. He was extremely emaciated. So we think that he may have had cancer, he may have had congestive heart disease from his Marfan syndrome, but he was a very sick man. He may have just been, maybe at that point, from the stress of the war, who knows, not even eating. But he was, I would say, very close to death. He was completely emaciated.
I had a question going back, I mean, a fair amount, or I guess from Gettysburg going forward, but the 140 children used on this experiment, have you ever heard anything from any of them? Or
I actually was able to.
Great question.
As a result of the technical proficiency of the internet and the ability to Google people and find some professional identification of them or whatever, I reached 6 or 7 of the kids. And I have to say, while they didn't remember as much as I did, I was able to confirm that they remembered that we were involved with time travel technologies. For example, all of them remembered the Montauk chair being in our learning lab at our public elementary school, which was Mount View Road School in Morris Plains, New Jersey. It was right down through the woods from my house growing up. And one of them remembered the teleporting up at Curtis Wright. And he started saying, he was still working in Morristown. He was the one that was still, or one of the 2 of the 7 that were still in town. And he said, "Andy, I haven't thought about this for years, but as you're talking, I'm starting to remember. Yeah, they were driving up to that technical place where they had built all those fancy planes. There was still a Glenn Curtiss Air Museum there when we would walk through to get to Building 68. And he said, yeah, and there was a device there, and we would jump through it. There'd be like a tunnel. Yeah, man, you're right. I remember that. So, in fact, to my credit, I not only found 6 or 7 of them.
Okay, that usually means Wi-Fi's dropped. Yep, there it is. I'm finding this fascinating. I love time travel stuff. Yeah.
Can I kick it? Yes, you can.
Can I kick it?
We support. Can I kick it? We support. Can I kick it? Yes, you can.
Welcome to Jelna. Let's go see how Jelna pot seed yogurt's made. Fresh milk's brought into our special pots, then with a little time and a great deal of care, we create uniquely thick and delicious Jelna pot seed yogurt.
Sounds like it. Oh man, what's going on with this?
When Green Acres came on, the first time he heard Mr. Haney, he goes,
Yeah.
"That's the voice."
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. That,
Yeah.
that sounds.
Yeah. So it was only like in the 80s that they went back and they realized that one of the things the president was suffering from was Marfan syndrome, and that affected the heart. Certainly, the Abraham Lincoln that I saw walk into Ford's Theater during my 6 or 7 visits in summer of '71 to Ford's Theater on a mission to walk up the balcony stairs, and get behind their balcony seating, was a very thin and emaciated 56-year-old. On the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot, he was essentially a walking skeleton in his suit. He was extremely emaciated. So we think that he may have had cancer, he may have had congestive heart disease from his Marfan syndrome, but he was a very sick man. He may have just been, maybe at that point, from the stress of the war, who knows, not even eating. But he was, I would say, very close to death. He was completely emaciated.
I had a question going back, I mean, a fair amount, or I guess from Gettysburg going forward, but the 140 children used on this experiment, have you ever heard anything from any of them? Or
I actually was able, given as a result of the technical proficiency of the internet and the ability to Google people and find some professional identification of them or whatever. I reached 6 or 7 of the kids, and I have to say, while they didn't remember as much as I did, I was able to confirm that they remembered that we were involved with time travel technologies. For example, all of them remembered the Montauk chair being in our learning lab at our public elementary school, which was Mount View Road School in Morris Plains, New Jersey. It's right down through the woods from my house growing up. And one of them remembered the teleporting up at Curtis Wright, and he started saying, he was still working in Morristown. He was the one that was still, or one of the 2 of the 7 that were still in town. And he said, Andy, I haven't thought about this for years, but as you're talking, I'm starting to remember. Yeah, they were driving up to that technical place where they had built all those fancy planes. There was still a Glenn Curtis Air Museum there where we would walk through to get to Building 68. And he said, yeah, and there was a device there, and we would jump through it. There'd be like a tunnel. Yeah, man, you're right. I remember that. So in fact, to my credit, I not only found 6 or 7 of them, but I received a corroboration that we weren't just in a program for gifted and talented school children. The whole group essentially validated my memories in the sense that they remembered the primary time travel device that was physically in the learning laboratory, which was the Montauk chair.
We need to interject something that you haven't brought out, and that is the fact that you were mind controlled as well.
Well, we were brainwashed.
Yeah, so you went through electroshock and other things to basically wipe memories.
Well, they involved us in a shocking game where we learned obedience to military authority. That was pretty vindictive and cool. It wouldn't pass muster under the torture convention today. That was depicted in the book Silent Weapons by the Hersha sisters. I may have been the very session they were in. As you say, when the word got out after midsummer of '71 that I was actually a future whistleblower and they were in possession of my book, and they realized I was remembering everything and citing names, dates, places, technologies, experiences. When we would get back to Curtis Wright, they would take us into the engineering building and give us about 30 seconds of electroconvulsive shock to dump endorphins, which prevents short-term memory from becoming intermediate long-term memory, and hence long-term.
Yeah, so part of that means that not everybody that was involved in the project may have full memory.
Oh no, they're going to have it block them.
One thing we can agree on.
What?
You're wrong.
And they were also at the end, when I left the project at the end of the summer of '72 in real time, I was
good night, Phil. God bless, mate.
Jersey, and I had needles inserted from the base of my spine up to the back.
Because I'm a guy and I'm supposed to be.
And I had a chemical infused into my brain and spinal column. And the only way I can describe it is,
do you mind? I'm actually streaming and people can hear that.
So atrocious. That was so evacuated.
I do.
Especially for a child to endure,
that's
an 11-year-old child to endure, or a 10-year-old even at that point. It could be pre-summer of '72. That if a police
Shawnee, God bless.
Pistol, I would have shot myself to death in the head. It was that bad. And as that was going on for several hours, somebody wearing a mask was saying, this is how you'll feel every time you think about what your experiences in Project Pegasus. And he had me walk it all the way through the moment my dad took me up to the teleport at Curtis Wright in winter of '68, all the way through what I had just done in summer of '72, like going to the year 2045 from that Stargate device at Cerritos. And that was an attempt to associate this evacuating headache with my project memories. But you know something? In that torture session, I said, I am not going to forget. I don't care how painful this gets. And so really what my story embodies is not of a young child being tortured to obscure or conceal his time travel experiences. What my story embodies, and I hope that readers will get from my book, is that what my story embodies is the triumph of the human spirit over the worst kind of adversity. Because what really happened is one person, namely myself, and I don't mean to be self-aggrandizing or vainglorious, but it's really the truth of what happened, so I have to tell it. One human being overcame the entire U.S. Department of Defense in trying to keep secret its time travel secrets. Because I overcame that torture session, I have a continuity of my experiences hidden in safe locations all over the earth. The story is going to be told even if I'm assassinated or I die accidentally. And,
thanks, Lois.
And so that's what happened. The human spirit won, and as I love to say in my talks, Tesla wins. We all know that Nikola Tesla was the greatest applied scientist in the history of our great American civilization. He was more ethical than Westinghouse and Edison. Edison cheated him when he first came to the United States. He cheated Tesla on a bet a $50,000 prize that Edison had posted for the solution of a technical problem that Tesla came to the United States to tell Edison he had the solution to that problem. He did. Edison cheated him out of that $50,000 prize. There was the whole subversion of Tesla in the battle between.
Also, Marconi, the sound system. Tesla worked out the sound system, but Marconi got the credit for it.
Direct and alternating current, and the underfunding of him, they bankrupted him. But I'm here as a fellow Slavic American to tell you that of Tesla's, that is, as a Polish American, he of course was a Serbian American immigrant to our country, that this great Slavic American immigrant inventor does become the principal figure in our human civilization because he invented the technology, the civic infrastructure of the 21st century, and through the efforts of my Polish American father and of myself as someone who's half Polish American, I want you to know that there was a major Slavic contribution to the future because Tesla wins. Tesla's technology does not get suppressed. Our children are going to be living in a world where they're going to be able to be in London, England, and instead of spending 24 hours in a commercial airliner, they're going to be jumping halfway across the planet, to the other side of the planet, to Auckland, New Zealand, or Sydney, Australia, in seconds rather than in 24 hours. And that world is only going to come about because Tesla lived and he had a brilliant.
That's not going to happen because the airlines will make no money. So that's not going to happen.
Imagination, and he had the ethicality to disguise what he was doing. And fortunately, some major heroes in the executive branch of the government empowered my father to go back and recapture his teleportation experiment. And now I'm telling the story of its direct application in the U.S. defense technical community. And as president, I'm going to declassify and deploy Tesla teleportation for real-time transport led by the United States. Imagine the economic and technical renaissance we'll have as the United States when we start declassifying these technologies and we literally occupy the field of high technology once again, not to blow up the world, but to make it economically and socially integrated and highly functioning. That's the great design science revolution that I'm going to implement as
That's not what the elites want.
president. And so the watchword is that Tesla wins.
So it sounds like you're going to put a lot of airlines out of business, and then the airlines aren't going to like it. The oil and gas companies aren't going to like it.
But you know something? You don't have a right to your father or grandfather's job. That I don't mean to be rude, but no, seriously. That's what the loggers said in Oregon. You know what? Instead of cutting down trees with in old growth forests with spotted owls in them, the sons and grandsons of those loggers are software engineers. They're school teachers. They're musicians. They're beer meisters here in Portland and Vancouver. So look at the economic renaissance we've had, and we know so few people now who are cutting down trees. I was just out at a clear cut northeast of Salem yesterday. I was with a law client. There was a clear cut next door, and I thought, God, I don't see those as often. Why? Because people who own forested land now are making beer, they're making music, they're cutting software, they're writing books, they're making movies. You know, so we don't have a cosmic right to our daddy's job.
And I was just bringing up the point that it's big business, and big business has money in the government, and therefore would try to stop it.
That's why we'll have to work with big business to perform the demographic transition so that we don't have negative externalities of technical growth, such as joblessness. I don't think it's authentic to just dump everybody in the airline industry into the unemployment line. If we're going to be able to revolutionize transport and put so much less material and energy and time in it, we're going to have the capital to retrain those people for other jobs.
Sure.
So we have to be committed to the bottom line interests of the people, but we also can't keep them stuck we can keep them stuck in the music of the 70s. I mean, every time I walk into a family restaurant, I hear James Taylor, you know, but I want to get there by a Tesla teleporter rather than my 2005 Chevy Malibu. Why? Because such technology has been available for 45 years. That's why I talk about being stuck in the 70s. When James Taylor was recording his classic songs that we still hear at Denny's, Tesla teleportation had already been reduced to practice by the defense technical community. So that's the time warp that we're stuck in.
So
we're stuck in the 70s.
So according to what you got going, we're going to be able to go from one side of the world to the other. are you also saying that you'd be able to time travel anytime you wanted to, or is that
No.
something that you're not gonna open
Yeah,
up?
yeah, no, we do have the proficiency to set the device, and we have other time travel technologies to do physical time travel. But I like to say that we can't permit mass time travel by mass people on mass timelines because it would result in mass chaos.
Sure.
Imagine that enlightened minority of people, economically self-enlightened, who would be time traveling just to buy up the new blue chip stocks of the future, the Microsofts and the Apples,
lottery tickets,
or lottery tickets based on cheating. So that would create social chaos.
2 million winners.
It would also drop down the jackpot below levels that I'd like to see. No. But no, we can't allow that because we need to preserve the integrity of timelines. What we found out about timelines when we were moving between them, even between separate timelines, for example, via Chronovision, is the timelines have their own integrity where major events that implicate the future, such as the existence of Abraham Lincoln, his election to the presidency, his assassination at Ford's Theater, are immutable. They don't change between adjacent timelines. What changes is the interstitial material, the minor things, the details. And so I don't think as to our own timeline, we even want to begin to fiddle with the small things even, because we may find ourselves, as Project Camelot indicated, that we might be undermining our own timeline, and something very untoward could happen, like the collapse of our timeline, if we allow too much time travel by too many people.
By the way, that may also be Casey. So you got to realize that he was going into the future, bringing back knowledge of certain things that happened over, let's say, this 40-year period that we're talking about. But they couldn't act upon what they learned.
I will say this: none of these time travelers predicted the COVID or Trump's election, and none of them predicted that.
In other words, they couldn't change it. Let's say they saw 9/11. They saw that event, so they could implement things to change it. But if they did, then the whole future's changed.
Sure.
And then all of the data is irrelevant.
Right. And also the paradox is what they saw in the chronovisor was what's going to happen at that time and place, come hell or high water, whatever you do to interfere with it. So there was a kind of a fait accompli of a given chronovisor image, like a fated event. And so the only time they ever released information was to do, I call it double green lighting. Like I had a discussion with my dad about what my future held. He said, well, you do graduate from law school, you come back to the house, you attend Cambridge, and I said, you mean Harvard? He goes, no, the University of Cambridge in England. So if you're invited to Cambridge, attend. That's double green lighting, where you give a future data point and then you affirm it. So you convince the person to jump through that opportunity when they reach it. And then he said, you pass the Washington bar and live and begin practicing law in Vancouver, Washington. And then you come back and take care of your mom when she has cancer. So they had clearly focused on my life a lot. In fact, when I was a child on the project, my dad told me I was going to be a lawyer, and that they even had images of me, chronovisor images of me in a courtroom in my 90s. So if I am elected president, at some point in my career, I do a John Quincy Adams, and I actually begin practicing law again at the Clark County, Washington level. So he said, we saw you in a courtroom in Washington State, and you were like 93. So at some point, I basically...
We hope you were a lawyer, then.
Yeah, so if you don't want to vote for me for president, you can definitely still become my client in Clark County, Washington. No, but so I was hearing these things in my future the whole time, but they were avoiding major revelations of what the future held, like talking about 9/11. My dad was kind of upset when his colleagues asked him about what that domestic Pearl Harbor was. But 9/11 was talked about openly when I was a kid on the project. Other engineers with lower security clearances than my dad, basically not being given access to the intelligence reports that were being promulgated by the CIA based on the quantum access that time travel allowed, were constantly inveighing upon my dad to reveal what he knew, just at lunch or when they went out for drinks or whatever. And I was served a grape soda in the bar. But so I heard a lot about what they knew the future held. I heard about 9/11, the emergence of AIDS as an epidemic disease, a sexually transmitted, potentially fatal disease. John Alexander McCone, who had been the director of Central Intelligence, was in a restaurant in New Mexico trying to explain to my father what the internet was. And after he explained what it was, my dad got up from the table and said, I'm still disturbed about this .com thing. And John McCone, former DCI, said to my dad, Ray, it's just a location on this information network. And my dad turned to him and said, John, or Alec as he was called, Alec, how do we know that? Maybe it means the commies have taken over by then. And now I could wish my dad was still alive because I could tell him it was the dot commies, not the commies in the former Soviet Union in China. And I heard about, let's say, the advent of common use of cell phones. And I said, how do you know that, Dad? And he said, we would like focus on downtown New York City in 2005 or something. And we saw you all walking around with these little walkie-talkies. So we knew that the phone became miniaturized. And
it seems to me even those kinds of, vague hints like that you were going to turn out to be a lawyer would be kind of, jeopardizing the future. I mean, what if you, a rebellious teenage phase and say, I don't want to be a lawyer.
Exactly. The danger of telling somebody about what their destiny holds is that they get to that moment and they balk. In other words, you put a selection pressure on their decision making. You put a little extra kismet in their thought process and a little extra thinking. So they were, in fact, concealing things about what our futures hold, for example, or held. For example, one time my dad came back from a technical meeting. I was being babysat, essentially, by his old friend Connie Chavez, who was the cashier and sometimes waitress at the La Hacienda and the La Placida restaurants in Old Town Albuquerque, New Mexico. And what my dad was revealing to her was that I was destined to go to Mars later when I was in my college years via teleportation, which I did, via jump room. And she said, well, Ray, does he go there to Mars before or after he publishes that paper with all those creatures in it, which was my 2008 paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, which is a landmark work in natural history that shows life forms, both human and animal, in NASA's photographs of Mars. In fact, it's the first written work to show humanoids living on another planet. And so my dad scowled at her because she was revealing in front of me that I had a destiny that implicated Mars, both as a chrononaut going there and also as a student of Marsology showing what's on Mars. So they were, in fact, trying to keep information about our own personal futures from us so it wouldn't put an untoward spin on us walking through those doors of opportunity and of kismet that we experience every moment of our lives, really. We can make a decision to change our future.
I'm curious now, because I was going to ask you that the military, if you'd speculated that the military was using this to do interplanetary travel, did you go to, the famous little place we see, the old IGG base, the old Anunnaki
No,
base?
Like the space on Mars?
No, I never saw the face of Mars. We did see pyramidal structures. There are 1,000 faces on Mars. Excuse me. The face on Mars is not singular. There are literally thousands of faces on Mars, both faces, heads, profiles, masks,
pyramids,
and pyramidal structures, because the Martians use all manner of primate faces, both human, chimpanzee-like, reptilian-looking, gorilla, Sasquatch-looking, and so forth, even reptilian per se, lizard-like, to indicate access points from the surface to their primarily underground civilization. All the face on Mars that Cydonia is a very developed one that's on the surface and is visible from space. In July of 2009, I found a location in the Rule Vallis of Mars in a photograph taken by a satellite by the European Space Agency that shows 9 faces that are visible from space of different animals and humanoids, and that are even clearer than the face on Mars at Cydonia. I do believe that the Cydonia relic is a face, and I think that it's not a trick of light and shadow. In fact, there are similar faces all over the planet Mars. In fact, some of them are actually staggered, so that when you look at a particular carving, it only makes sense when you line it up with several other carvings, and many of them are a form of signage that indicates whether that location is either safe or unsafe from predators on the surface.
According to the Lost Book of Enki, it's like a 5,600-year-old cuneiform Akkadian written tablet. Was founded in 1849. There's like 13 or 14 of them. Said that Alalu, he was the previous king on Nibiru, was buried there, and his pilot put in orders to have his likeness carved on it, because when he died, they buried him in a cave in that chart.
Yeah, I know that the Sumerian literature that you're referring to,
Right.
What I know for Project Pegasus is that the small gray extraterrestrials kickstarted our civilization about 5,000 years ago, which is consistent with both the Hebrew and the Masonic dating of the world at about 5,700 years. That's not planet Earth. That's just the civilization we're in. Now we're in the second civilization on Earth, after it was kickstarted in ancient Sumer, that declined around 11,500 years ago when both Mars and Earth were hit by debris from space. That eclipsed the first civilization on Earth, that was the great maritime civilization that built the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, and the pyramidal culture that broke out of the Middle East into Mesoamerica and Southeast Asia, for example, as indicated by the pyramidal ruins in Central and South America and ruins like Angkor Wat in Cambodia. So what has been kept back from the people is not only this ET intervention and continued small gray abduction of humans to make particular people more creative to advance the development of civilization on Earth, but the fact that we're in the second civilization on Earth. Now, that first civilization on Earth, which existed prior to that catastrophic event in our solar system 11,500 years ago, we don't know how many thousands of years it existed before that catastrophe and was destroyed, but we do know that it was on Mars, because my research organization, the Mars Anomaly Research Society, or MARS, one of our photo analysts, Ross Curley of Illinois, found the face of a pharaoh, a perfect carving of a pharaoh, on a rock on Mars.
Yeah, we've all seen that, the face of the pharaoh on Mars. He's right.
On Sol 2012 of the rover Spirits.
And if he's right about that, Vast, that's why I believe in the Stargate series. This sort of reason.
Sojourn on the planet Mars. It is of an individual with both European and African features. It looks dramatically, actually, like President Obama, with that kind of blending of European and African features from his parentage. And it clearly is an Egyptian pharaoh because it has the conical headdress, the cobra ready to strike motif, or Wadjet.
I've seen that pharaoh that looks like Obama, and it does look like Obama.
Which was the symbol of Lower Egypt, which became the national symbol of Egypt during the reign of the pharaohs. And in fact, it's on the corner of the rock or piece of metal that the rover Spirit photographed on the surface in an orientation so that the corner of the object that was carved into looks like the pyramid, or a pyramid behind the face of the pharaoh. So we know that that first civilization on Earth that left its fingerprint in the pyramidal structures we find in Egypt, and now we have a huge one we found in Croatia. There's a very large black one in Ecuador, and also in other areas of Mesoamerica and in Southeast Asia, that civilization reached Mars. What we don't see on Mars is any rocketry debris. And we also find in their hieroglyphs what look like Tesla teleporters. So I'm conjecturing that the ancient Martian civilization reached what is every 2 years our nearest celestial neighbor, namely the planet Mars, via teleportation, as we were in the Mars Jumper program in the early 1980s.
I'm not trying to cut this topic off. It's very interesting, but we're already running long and we're kind of going off track with the Mars thing.
Okay.
One thought that kind of occurred to me is maybe, your dad, maybe there was no danger in mentioning that you were a lawyer or mentioning someone's future, because it kind of makes me think of the grandfather paradox. If you went back in time and killed your grandfather, what would happen? Because if your grandfather wasn't allowed, then he couldn't complete his genealogy, and then therefore you would never be born. So therefore you couldn't have gone back in time to kill him. It's one of those weird things.
That's been solved. The paradox embodied in the grandfather paradox is if you exist to plan or to implement going back in time to kill any one of your ancestors and hence obviate your existence, because time travel has existed since 1970, you can make as many journeys as you want, but you can't succeed at any of those journeys because you exist to formulate the intent to attempt that murder, to time travel, to kill your mother, your father, your grandfather. That's related to the kill Hitler paradox. Is yes, you can go back and kill Adolf Hitler before his genocidal rise to power, but if you do kill him when he's still an obscure Austrian artist, Coast Guard painter, you won't know about his existence as Adolf Hitler the Führer, because you will have killed him before his rise to power. So you could choose him as any one of the obscure artists of that era to go back and kill, but you also can't succeed at killing Hitler's rise before his rise to power, because it is the fruition of his rise to power it gives you the future information to plan the trip to go kill Hitler.
But that's kind of a paradox then, that it makes it, in theory, impossible. Because in the physical world, he would still have a bullet in his brain. Whether you existed anymore or were there to put it there, it still would be there.
Well, the paradox is this, and this is how the paradox works. It is indeed a paradox, but these paradoxes of causation exist because time is linear in the sense that it's sequential and things change and go in a particular direction. But time travel is not. Time travel is non-sequential. Like, for example, my father and I jumped from fall of 1971 to the beginning of the summer of 73. We lived that summer of 73 in New Mexico, and then we jumped backward to the fall of 1971. And then 3 weeks after I had placed a phone call to my mother in New Mexico in summer of 73, 3 weeks after we returned to the fall of 71, she received that phone call, walked into our kitchen, and was talking to me in New Mexico in summer of 73 as she was looking at me while I was playing down in the rec room. So the paradox is created.
Man, if that's true, that's crazy. But you can't. Okay, I thought about this. You can split your soul. I've seen people who've had near-death experiences, and their soul was split. They were in different compartments of hell all at once. So that's probably what's happening here.
By the fact that time travel is non-linear. And when you make that non-linear transit back to the past, you can't succeed at obviating a precondition.
Yep, that's it, boss. That's what they found out.
To a future eventuality, the rise of Hitler to power, the survival of your parent or grandparent so that you are produced biologically and so forth.
Which would make basically that the future is inevitable. What's going to happen will happen.
That's a related conundrum, and that results from the fact that when you visit the past to try to change it, to try to change the course of world history, you can't because you're in the original past event. So, for example, if I tried to go back and be the shooter that killed President Lincoln at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. on April 14th of 1865, I could try to be that person, but the person who achieved that goal that night was John Wilkes Booth or somebody else. That was my mission to determine. And that became deeply embedded in the quantum hologram because that's what happened during the original event. All I was some sideshow, or would be some sideshow of the original event that never got told in history. There was a mysterious.
And when it fails, the knowledge of it will probably be wiped out too.
Yeah, things that don't have great consequence are forgotten by history. Nobody.
So you couldn't learn from what went wrong to try and
most inconsequential acts get forgotten. It's the very good and the very bad things that get remembered. So the paradox in that case is that we can't change the present by going back and quantum engineering.
All the superhero movies have got time travel in them now. And we know they're predictive programming.
The past, because when we visit the past, we're in the original past event, and that is essentially, in physics you have the collapse of the wave function, and just by going back and being in that event where the collapse of the wave function is already occurring, you can't grab the wave function and pull it up and change its direction. It's already embedded in the quantum hologram.
I absolutely love theorizing, fantasizing, whatever about this kind of stuff, but eventually it hits a point where my head just starts to hurt and I give up.
Well, we're all born. When we're born, we learn about the world around us through linear causation. If I cry, mommy will come and give me some juice, whatever. So the problem is that when we're confronted by the effects of retrocausation, for example, it's almost impossible to determine. For example, when I went back to 1863, I was photographed. That photograph showed up in the cache of photographs that was donated to the Library of Congress that had once been owned by Matthew Brady, the famed Civil War photographer. Then right there on the pages of Life magazine, the Josephine Cottage image of Lincoln at Gettysburg with me as a 10-year-old time traveler began to be propagated. The question I've been asked is, when you were 10 years old and you jumped from 1972 to 1863 and were in that photograph, when you went back in time, did that cause you to be in that photograph? In other words, when you were then photographed and then went back to 1972, did you return to a changed future where suddenly every version of that photograph and every library and magazine in the whole world suddenly changed, like playing cards being dealt, and now suddenly you're in that photograph? Or did you leave in 1972 that had that that image with you in it in books, magazines, and so forth? And the answer is that even though I hadn't gone back in time yet to 1863 to be in that photograph, indeed, all of the copies of the Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg, including the ones in popular magazines, contain the image of me. Why? Because from the perspective of 1863, I was visiting from the future, and I was there that afternoon. I mean, come on, Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln was over my right shoulder, those 2 pixels that show his head as he was sitting down. He probably waved to the crowd after the boisterous cheer and then sat down, because we know that the orator Edward Everett then spoke for like 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours, and then he later said to Lincoln, "You said in 15 minutes what it took me 3 hours to say." The answer is that from the perspective of 1863, I visited from the future, but in real time and from the likening of my own lifespan, I had to reach age 10 and a half to make that trip. But that event of visiting the future was already deeply embedded in the quantum hologram in history. It had to be, after all, because I was photographed there in 1863, not in 1972. So that's the most difficult thing for people to get their heads around, and I don't fault them for that, because look, from the time we develop object permanence as an infant, we begin thinking sequentially. A is followed by B is followed by C. But retrocausation causes the cause to exist before, causes the effect to exist before the cause in a real-time analysis. And that's paradoxical.
I have a question. When you jump to 2045,
right?
Did you stay 10? Did you see yourself as adults?
Yes, and in fact, the reason why we had to have other devices to get before the advent of Tesla teleportation, that's a related question. It wasn't because of some mystical connection to the technology. It was simply the practical problem of being stranded in time. Now, what you're asking is the biological consequences of time travel. In the Einsteinian model of time travel that we've been told, following, for example, H.G. Wells' book, The Time Machine, and as we were told as children of the 1960s during the space program, that, when the astronauts start going outside of Earth orbit, their beard growth is slower and all this. The Einsteinian model of quantum physics is invalid. We were reaching the future, for example, when I was jumping, let's say, through the Stargate at Cerritos to 2045, I was reaching that 75-year distance in time and space in 30 seconds. So I was 30 seconds older when I reached it. I would then age in an ordinary diurnal way. For example, the 3 summers that I spent in New Mexico with my dad before jumping back to the beginning of the summer, or back to the fall of 71 in that case, I was on those time loops for 3 3-month periods in my childhood. And people say, well, did you look a year older in 5th grade? I said, I looked like my classmates because I entered kindergarten at age 4, even when there were children who had been born over a year before me in class in kindergarten. So I basically matured into their same age peer by the end of the 5th grade, because I had started as a 4-year-old.
So could you have actually seen yourself as an adult in 2045 as that 10-year-old?
I was there as a 10-year-old. If I had been told, if when I'm 84, I think that's what I'll be in 2045, I could be told the time and place of where that visit occurred, I could go to that place and I would have seen myself as a 10-year-old popping into view on this broad pedestrian plaza in front of this beautiful brushed steel and emerald building, walk into it, have the door automatically open, and go in and interact with a staff member from the future who was giving me a little canister with a microfilm summary, about 300 feet of microfilm, containing summaries of events, major events, conditions, and personalities, and so forth.
So are you looking forward to when you're 84 in looking for that kid?
I'm not even going to try to do that, but also in 1971, when we jumped to 1991 accidentally in Santa Fe, if I had then flown to Portland as a 10-year-old, I could have seen myself going to law school in my late 20s here in the Northwest at Lewis and Clark Law School, because I was in 2 places at the same time.
I am sorry to do this. It's very fascinating, but we are running way over time. We're like a half hour or more over right now.
Great, thanks.
So do you have any contact information you want to throw out?
Yes, my time travel discourse is on Facebook in the group called Project Pegasus. We're now over 15,000 members, and I've answered every question, and I've engaged in about 2,000 arguments. I'm retiring from convincing everybody of my true account. I'm also running for President of the United States as an independent in
Okay, that was rather interesting. I'll go back to what we were watching before. Let's hope she gets away from the New Age stuff.
But we need to wake up from our
Thank
slumber,
you.
come out of it, and start continuously projecting high vibrations of love and light towards everything. Okay, and you know, there's a few things I want to show you that go with this, because you know, if you guys have been following me for you know, a few years and stuff, you know, when I was with the rapture and everything, that I was pretty you know, forefront and center, saying that, you know, Trump was the Antichrist and all this kind of stuff. Brothers and sisters, I've been doing some deep dives and some deep searching of my soul, and, you know, asking Father to really, really, really reveal this. And it's occurred to me, and I keep getting this verse from what Jesus said. And he said, a good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot produce good fruit. It's as simple as that, black and white. Okay, and I'm researching Trump and his family like no tomorrow. I'm like, all right, I'm really going to see what this guy's about, because maybe what I have felt and what I have said.
Okay, I hope they talk about Baron Trump's miraculous time adventures.
Been shared that, you know, that he's the Antichrist and all this kind of stuff, and he's coming in with flatteries and all this garbage. Maybe I'm wrong. And, you know, I stand here today on the 4th of June 2024 saying that I truly think that I was wrong. I think that Trump is a big key in this, is a big key in all of this. And he is kind of like the ringleader of this great awakening. Okay, and I know that may sound a little bit bizarre from how I used to speak, and, you know, those people who don't like Trump, you know, you're going to be like, oh, what are you talking about, woman? But just hear me out. I have recorded something and I want to play it for you. I basically recorded it on my phone recorder because I can't play YouTube because I'll get a copyright strike. But I just want you to listen to how he speaks. No other president, okay, no other previous president has ever talked about God like Trump has. And take Obama, for example. Remember when he famously was going on about how, you know, what kind of person would you want to be if you're following Leviticus, that you'd have to stone your own kid and all this kind of stuff. Remember that, how he's mocking it? We'll just have a little listen to Trump. It's only 3 minutes, but I want you to hear this, okay? Because he's talking about God bless the USA Bible, okay? So just have a listen.
I'm proud to be partnering with my very good friend Lee Greenwood, who doesn't love his song, God Bless the USA, in connection with promoting the God Bless the USA Bible. This Bible is the King James Version and also includes our founding father documents, yes, the Constitution, which I'm...
Okay, that's pretty impressive, and that's why I have mixed emotions about Trump, because he does say things like this, and he did stop termination, if you know what I mean, in the Supreme Court. So I'm sort of torn which way to go on Trump.
Fighting for every single day, very hard, to keep Americans protected. Also, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance are all part of this God Bless the USA Bible, and it's just very important and very important to me. Well, I have a lot of people have it. You have to have it for your heart, for your soul. Many of you have never read them and don't know the liberties and rights you have as Americans and how you are being threatened to lose those rights. It's happening all the time. It's a very sad thing that's going on in our country, but we're going to get it turned around. Religion and Christianity are the biggest things missing from this country, and I truly believe that we need to bring them back, and we have to bring them back fast. I think it's one of the biggest problems we have. That's why our country is going haywire. We've lost religion in our country. All Americans need a Bible in their home, and I have many. It's my favorite book. It's a lot of people's favorite book. This Bible is a reminder that the biggest thing we have to bring back America and to make America great again is our religion. Religion is so important. It's so missing, but it's going to come back, and it's going to come back strong, just like our country is going to come back strong. In the end, we do not answer to bureaucrats in Washington. We answer to God in heaven. Christians are under siege. We must protect content that is pro-God. We love God, and we have to protect anything that is pro-God. We must defend God in the public square and not allow the media or the left-wing groups to silence, censor.
This is stunning. Wow. I'm so impressed. Everyone, wow.
Or discriminate against us. We have to bring Christianity back into our lives and back into what will be again a great nation. Our founding fathers did a tremendous thing when they built America on Judeo-Christian values. Now that foundation is under attack, perhaps as never before. What can we do? Stand up, speak out, and pray that God will bless America again. I'm proud to endorse and encourage you to get this Bible. We must make America pray again. Pray, get educated, get motivated, and stand with me and the legions of Americans asking God to bless our great nation, to bring our great nation back, and to make America great again. I'm proud to partner with Lee in this offering. He's a very special man, both as a talent, but maybe even more so as a human being. He's very, very special. And I think you all should get a copy of God Bless the USA Bible Now and help spread our Christian values with others. There you have it. Let's make America pray again. God bless you, and God bless the USA.
Wow.
All right, like anyone can, anyone cannot deny that that is absolutely beautiful. Regardless of what I've talked about, about the Old Testament and, and Yahweh and things like this, it doesn't matter. The simple fact is, prior to, 2020, the world was a pretty decent place, yes, there's always crime, yes, there's always this, but you know what I'm saying? When prayer was in the schools and there was more Christian values and all this kind of stuff, take religion. I know he says religion, so don't come in the comments and write, oh, religion, we don't need religion. I get that, okay, but the world was a much better place when we had those morals, you know what I'm saying? So the point why I showed you that and let you listen to that was because my view on Trump is, through study and research. It's not just I'm changing my mind now and just, whatever. But I do my due diligence and really study and research this because it's very hard for me to come from one camp and say, oh, Trump is the Antichrist. And now I'm like, okay, it seems to be that there's been a smear campaign from the beginning. And what I'm trying to say here, brothers and sisters, I think this all ties in together. This inevitable event that's going to happen, which is the awakening process, which we're going through right now. I truly also think while I'm remembering this right now, I'll talk about this as well. I had a download on my spirit, and there's all this talk of us going to, like, when we raise our frequency and our vibration, and we see the world as a beautiful place, and we see the kindness and the beauty in things, and we love, and the world becomes a much better place. I am testament to this because I've been changing how I speak, how I think, and even like reaffirming things in my own mind when I feel like my mind's going off on my negative tangents that I've been programmed to do. I truly believe through a download on my spirit that this is the process of where the tribulation, so to speak, will come from. I think those people that cannot get out of this world. And this is why Jesus always talks about don't be of this world. They are the ones that are going to stay on this 3D dense dimension, okay? And they are consumed by
Okay, again, I'm getting creeped out by her new age stuff.
By the things of this world. You know, watching the news and watching forever the fear mongering and the next virus and you know what's going on in Israel and all this fear mongering BS. Okay.
See, I'm out on this girl. I've had enough. That's not fear mongering. That's telling you what's going on. This girl's not a full on Christian. Okay,
Those
what else can
people,
we do?
I truly think the book of Revelation and prophecy, I think, was written for a time as this.
Okay, I'm done with her. I'll finish with prophecy from Stan.
Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is Israel.
Thank you, Vas. I just smelled a rat then. I gave her another chance. She's not a Christian. She's New Age hiding behind Christianity.
Is a sign. Want to know the future? Want to know what's coming? It all starts, of course, with the Bible. Then we turn around and look at Israel and we see what's happening with Israel. Then we start listening to the prophecies, what's going on in America. First of all, let's...
Vas, you know us here. We love the rabbit hole. Put us down the rabbit hole. We'll explore it. You know that.
Talk about the prophecies. Let me give you a suggestion. I know that there is a side of us that wants to say, oh, I'll be glad when these are proven to be accurate. I'll be glad when some of the stuff you've been talking about, I'll be glad some of the stuff I've been hearing about starts coming to pass. Actually, I don't think that's the right attitude. We don't want these prophecies to come to pass. They're going to come to pass soon enough. We don't want them to come to pass, and we certainly do not want to pray that they come to pass. I have to tell you, I mean, I've gotten sick and tired of some of the things going wrong in this nation too. And one night in my prayer closet, I started to pray, Lord, you know, bring this earthquake on America. Man, I mean, immediately. Boy, you know, when God wants to talk, he can talk. If you haven't discovered that, then it's coming. And boy, I mean, immediately I got rebuked. Absolutely not. You do not pray any of these things come to pass. Thing is, if we pray they will not come to pass, they're still going to come to pass in most cases. That's not exactly true. We do need to try to pray away as many as possible. Ideally, to pray all of it away. And that's the reason we started Fast Track. That's Praying for Prophecy Club and our staff. And also we started Fast Gap. And there's about 1,500 people on Fast Track, about 850 people on Fast Gap, praying for America. Here's how you sign up to either one or both. You can quit anytime you want to. We never send product offers or appeals for donations. prophecyclub.com. You just slide to the bottom, sign up, quit anytime you want to, okay? But if you want to join other brothers and sisters that are praying to help Prophecy Club to do the things that God has called us to do, and also praying blessings to pray that these bad things don't come to our nation, Fast Gap, Fast Track for Prophecy Club, Fast Gap for America. Okay. We're talking about Israel today. Comes from Hal Turner. On August 15th, the report surfaced that Israel made an actual nuclear threat to Iran and that Iran responded harshly. August 19th says that Iran's harsh response was nuclear. They're saying via back channels, the United States told Iran that Israel would respond to an Iranian retaliation over the assassination by Israel of Ismail Haniyeh, however you say that, Israel's response to the U.S. would be tactical nuclear weapons. In other words, Israel has now admitted to Iran, yes, we have nukes, and Iran has admitted back, yes, we have nukes too.
Wow.
Now, the next thing is very confirming to me, it's scary. Israel also disclosed that they have procured undisclosed scalar weapons. Now, you remember scalar weapons, okay? We've got a whole DVD up on watchprophecyclub.com called Russia's Secret Weapon to Defeat America. If you want to watch it, by Russia's Secret Weapon to Defeat America. Oh, good grief. You tell I'm getting old. Some of these things don't come to my mind as fast as they used to. Anyway, scalar wave was invented by Tesla. He took it to the United States. They tried it out on HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, and they could make it work. But the Russians didn't have that problem. And then, of course, now many nations have it, including the Mohawks. And this is what can make entire regions of the atmosphere very, very hot, very cold. It can take out anything in the air, on the land, on the sea, under the sea, any place on the globe, but perhaps even any place in the galaxy with little to no notice. Khrushchev called it the perfect weapon because you can't tell what did it, where it came from, who did it, and you can destroy things. Okay, so they procured undisclosed scalar weapons, and Israel, Iran says, will cease to exist if Israel attacks Iran. Iran went on to tell the United States that Israel will cease to exist if Israel attacks Iran. Well, let me just tell you, that ain't going to happen. I mean, Iran may attack Israel, but Israel's not going to cease to exist. I'll show you. Iran went on further and says it told the United States that U.S. military is also in jeopardy, as is the United States itself. So Iran apparently is not bluffing, and they now think that they can destroy Israel. They might be able to do some damage or maybe even participate in destroying America. It ain't going to happen to Israel. I'll show you. The article goes on to say nearly a third of the entire U.S. Navy is now deployed to the Middle East. And Israel-Iran fight is coming, they say. All right, now let's get into more of what he says here. First of all, he's about to say he's a marginal Christian. Matter of fact, he says at the bottom of this article, I cut it out, didn't have the room. He says he's no part of an organized religion, unquote. He also...
Bas, I don't understand what the scalar technology is. I know it's a separate technology, but I don't understand it at all.
Goes on to say why the U.S. feels the need to defend Israel for murdering a man in cold blood in Iran's capital city is anyone's guess. In other words, he's not supporting Israel. Sad for him. Yet, for some reason, the U.S. is doing exactly that. Israel hit Iran. Israel murdered a man in a building just 750 meters from Iran's presidential palace. It was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Under the United Nations Charter, Article 51, Iran has the absolute right to hit Israel back. So why is the U.S. involving itself? Okay, well, hang on. 1,200 people killed on October the 7th. What was it? 250 hostages taken. Okay, I think that Israel was attacked first on this deal, and rest assured, the people behind it, both the money and the motivation, is still coming from Iran. Well, that's simple. Campaign contributions, I don't agree with all that. Now, let me remind you. See, my purpose is not to just bring you the news. My objective here is to bring you the news in light of Bible prophecy and in light of what the modern prophecies and prophets are saying. So Chris Reed, as you recall, said, so goes Israel.
Wi-Fi's dropped out.
Told the United States that U.S. military is also in jeopardy, as is the United States itself. So Iran apparently is not bluffing. And they now think that they can destroy Israel. They might be able to do some damage or maybe even participate in destroying America. It ain't going to happen to Israel. I'll show you. The article goes on to say nearly a third of the entire U.S. Navy is now deployed to the Middle East. And Israel-Iran fight is coming, they say. All right, now let's get into more of what he says here. First of all, he's about to say he's a marginal Christian. Matter of fact, he says at the bottom of this article, I cut it out, didn't have the room. He says he's no part of an organized religion, unquote. He also goes on to say why the U.S. feels the need to defend Israel for murdering a man in cold blood in Iran's capital city is anyone's guess. In other words, he's not supporting Israel. Sad for him. Yet, for some reason, the U.S. is doing exactly that. Israel hit Iran. Israel murdered a man in a building just 750 meters from Iran's presidential palace. It was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Under the United Nations Charter, Article 51, Iran has the absolute right to take Israel back. So why is the U.S. involving itself? Okay, well, hang on. 1,200 people killed on October the 7th. 250 hostages taken? Okay, I think that Israel was attacked first on this deal, and rest assured, the people behind it, both the money and the motivation, is still coming from Iran. Well, that's simple. Campaign contributions, I don't agree with all that. Now, let me remind you. See, my purpose is not to just bring you the news. My objective here is to bring you the news in light of Bible prophecy and in light of what the modern prophecies and prophets are saying. So Chris Reed, as you recall, said, so goes Israel, so goes America. In other words, America, you want to be blessed? You better be blessing Israel. Israel will never lose another battle. Genesis 48:3. So let's jump down to 4. He gave this land. See, some people are saying, oh, well, Israel is just a people, it's not a land. Oh, no, it's a people and it's a land. God gave this land to end seed after thee for an everlasting possession. So the land that God gave to Israel is theirs forever and ever. And his covenant is with them forever and ever. I will bless them that bless you and curse them to curse you. In other words, we never, ever turn against Israel. Yeah, well, they do bad things. Well, so do we do bad things. But we don't turn against Israel, ever. We always support Israel. Genesis 15:18, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt, that would be the Nile, unto the great river, the river of Euphrates. So I did up this little map. This is the land, according to the scriptures, that God gave to Israel. And I personally believe that there's about to be a war. I don't think it's imminent. I don't think this is it, but maybe it is. And Israel is going to pull out some kind of a secret weapon. And who knows, it may be angels. I don't know. But anyway, some kind of a secret weapon, and they're going to destroy all of the surrounding nations around.
I reckon Gabriel's ark.
Okay. Zechariah says, all that burden themselves with Israel will be cut in pieces. That's talking about Armageddon. Joel 3:2 says, I will gather all nations to the valley.
But it's hard to know who to pray for in Israel, because you know you got the Star of David. We know what that really is. So it's hard to know who to pray for in Israel.
Jehoshaphat, they means judgment, and including all the nations that parted my land. And he's going to destroy them. Now let's talk about the future in light of Israel. Okay, first of all, 4 things. I covered this yesterday. I think the prophecies are saying that 400,000 massive arrests are soon to take place. I don't know when, but my guess is soon. And it's part of putting Trump back in charge. He may not come back as a president, but as a king. It'll also be associated with the new financial system, things like you see there. And it won't calm down until about July 2025, says Chris Reed. I do not believe it is the internal revolution, and here's why. My wife was given these prophecies here back in 2006. One of them says, Israel has attacked, America sends troops. Now, we don't know the order. What you see is what I think the order will be in, but we don't know the order. So it could be that Israel might be about to attack, it might be that Iran is about to attack Israel, And maybe this is point number 5. And if you look at these, we don't see any of those have come to pass yet. That's why I say it's not the internal revolution. If you look at what Chris Reed was told, he did see Israeli-Palestinian two-state solution reached, but if these are in order, and we think they are, then that means we're not set until we see 30% devaluation, Middle East oil strikes, deal with China, which did happen June the 9th of this year. Riots, civil unrest, citizens demand entitlement. We haven't seen that. So this is yet down the road. We watched real close to see if it was happened this year, but it didn't happen this year. Now let's jump to a brief reminder of the dream that Chris Reed had. And I think this
That's tight. What's on your mind, mate? You know that.
is credible stuff. He says, all of this rebirth of America, the new name is called Republic of the United States. No longer called the United States of America, Republic of the United States. He said all this starts in the April-May area. Well, what happened in there? That was when Trump was standing trial in New York under this Judge Marchand. He said there's going to be a series event. It'll be before the elections of 24, causes chaos, affects elections, causes grace division during the elections. It'll be like an October surprise. I don't know that that's necessarily saying it's coming in October. What he's saying is there won't be any warning. And there's going to be a huge awakening and awareness of evil and corruption going on in America. In my opinion, that's the massive arrest. We can never let this happen again, everyone will say. In other words, they see all of the corruption. It's all been exposed, in my opinion. And all of this bad stuff ended around July 2025. Now let's jump to the next topic of Israel. Comes from Most Important News, my friend Michael Snyder. Silver trumpets were blown on the Temple Mount. That's the first part we want to talk about. Then I'm going to get to some shocking information about the Shroud of Turin. I'm going to show you what really happened. So in Tisha B'Av, silver trumpets were blown on the Temple Mount for the very first time in almost 2,000 years, just like they are about to sacrifice a red heifer. Matter of fact, this is the first time a red heifer has even showed up in 2,000 years, much less that they're about to sacrifice it. They say they're going to do it this year. They've been saying that all year long now, but we'll see. It'll happen in God's timing. There was a highly significant moment for the Jewish people all over the globe. These silver trumpets were designed to be copies of those used in Solomon's temple. Also on Tisha B'Av, a magnitude 5.4 earthquake greatly shook areas of Syria and Lebanon. Why? It's been suggested that this may have prevented a large attack on Israel that was planned for Tisha B'Av. The following comes from Jerusalem Post. In our collective memory, the Tisha B'Av has always been a solemn day, marked by the destruction of the first and second temples. This year, however, the day bore witness to what many of us view as a modern day miracle. Okay, now, hang on. What that may be telling us, it may be that God's curses against Israel for all of the sins that they've done may have already been lifted or are about to be lifted, because he's now about to start bringing the promises he gave to bless Israel. He goes on to say, as a modern day miracle, a testament to divine intervention that could not have come at a more crucial time. Reports confirmed a 5.4 magnitude earthquake that struck Syria and Lebanon, profoundly impacting the region. This was not just any seismic event, though. It may have served as an unanticipated yet divine act that thwarted a grave threat against the Jewish nation. Hezbollah, an established proxy of Iran, had been preparing to launch an attack on Israel on Tisha B'Av, a direct affront planned deliberately for Tisha B'Av. Many of the group's underground tunnels, teeming with armaments, may have been reduced to rubble by the act of God to protect his children, which could effectively halt Hezbollah's nefarious plan before it could materialize. So maybe there's not about to be Iran attacking Israel. Let's go on now. It's hard to perceive as a mere coincidence that the earth shook on the very day Hezbollah had intended to send Israel into mourning once more. With tunnels collapsing, their arsenals buried, what could have been more devastating assault turned into a day of bewildering relief and gratitude. Now, let me get to one of the more favorite things I'm going to do. I'm about to answer this big question. Is the Shroud of Turin Jesus? What was it put on? Here's what they believe. Some people believe that when Jesus was laid down, this Shroud of Turin, in other words, it's like a sheet that goes on top of him and all around him, okay? It's like a one continuous sheet, and they lay this on top of the body. And of course, when Jesus resurrected himself, the rumor is that it caused an image to be left on the cloth that was laying over him. That's what they claim. Is that true? I'm going to show you the truth. A team of scientists examined it using a wide-angle X-ray scattering to determine when the cloth was originally manufactured. The technique measures the natural aging of flax cellulose and converts it to time since manufacture. They were able to determine that the cloth was consistent with another linen sample that was from the land of Israel in the 1st century. The data profiles were fully compatible with analogous measurements obtained on a linen sample whose dating, according to historical records, is in the 55-74 AD area found in Masada. Okay. In other words, this study strengthens the argument that the cloth on which the image appears is about 2,000 years old. Okay. My question is, so if they could prove that the cloth is exactly the right date and is made like all the other cloth in the days of Jesus was made.
Okay, I think you're asking a bit too much there, Stan.
Does that prove that that was on Jesus when he brought himself back from the dead? And did it leave an image on this cloth? I'm going to go ahead and tell you right up front, no.
And what he doesn't know is Jews were wrapped up in linen like that when they get put in their tomb. They were wrapped up like that.
It's a fraud. I'll show you why. And I'll have to tell you that I didn't see it. Ron Wyatt showed this to me. So anyway, this is a picture of the shroud. Now, the first thing I want you to look at is off to your right, the area in the brown. See where you see the red arrow? It's only 0 inches between the crown of the head here and the back of the head here. Now, I actually got a measuring tape a few minutes ago. I measured from here to here on me, and it's 8.5 inches. So if this surrounds the body all the way around, the area there in the brown area on your right should be 8.5 inches, but it's 0. So how do you get 0 inches from here to
Okay, so that's suggesting it's not 3D.
Here? Obviously, it was laid flat, and somehow it was
in 2D, not 3D, in 2D.
So if you look at the other image, the one in the center, it should be 8.5 inches here, but it's only 0. If you look at the image on your far left, same thing. Now let's look at another version. Now this is a drawing, the one on the top, and the drawing here has separated the head a little bit more. And then if you look at the bottom image, it should be 8.5 inches, but even on the drawn image, it shows it only 1.5 inches or 2 inches. So let's take that. Let's say it's even 3 inches. Who would have 3-inch measurement between this part and this part, between the crown and the start of the hairline here? Who would have 3 inches there? Well, the real Shroud of Turin, if you back up and look at it, over on your right, has no room, not even 1 inch. It's 0. So, as you look at this image on the left, is that correct? No. And the image in the center, that's the way the Shroud of Turin is. That's a no. How about if we really put 8.5 inches? Well, it would be something like that. In other words, it should be that there should be the top of the head image.
I get the point he's making. It's pretty interesting.
On there as well. And there is no top of the head image. So if you look up, burial shrouds are just that. It's a shroud. It's like an envelope, okay? And it's supposed to cover the body all the way around. It's not just laid on the top and then not just laid on the bottom. It's totally covering the body. And it just didn't do that. It's just not true. So this is probably the way it was created. Probably was laid on some kind of
Okay, Vars, it's just me and you. I'm going to hang up when he finishes this.
a board or something like that. And then the image was formed in the shroud. But the point is, it's not Jesus. It's not a human. It's not even real. It's a fraud. Now, in closing, let me just say thank you for your help. I asked for some help a couple of days ago. Thank you for those that have.
Vars, I'll check it out overnight and see if there's much out there on the shroud. I might do that tomorrow. Okay, I'm out, guys.
So, however, we're still not past the summer slump. Still not out of the woods here. So if God has blessed you, you can help us. Now would be a really, really good time. And